Hello, welcome to Plat Chat episode 112. We've got Jaws here today joining us. Thank you, Jaws, for coming along. And we've got ourselves a very solemn opening, actually, to this episode as well. Because as of the day of recording, this is actually the 4-year anniversary of the passing of Internet Hulk as well, who was a huge figure at the very beginning of Overwatch, provided a huge amount to the community in terms of mentorship, playing a huge amount at the beginning. He was moving into coaching. He was, as far as I can recall, going into League of Legends at the time of his passing as well. And that hit the Overwatch community incredibly hard when he died 4 years ago. And unfortunately, this week as well, we've got another guy who's passed away way too young. Alarm, the flex support of the Philadelphia Fusion, we found out just yesterday, has died at the age of 20, which is an absolute tragedy for anybody. But it feels especially hard, I think, for the Overwatch community because he was such a big figure within the scene. It might sound a little strange if you weren't familiar with Overwatch because he was like the Rookie of the Year last year, but he was competing in Overwatch for so long, and so much of his pretty short life as a young adult was dedicated to getting good at Overwatch and being great. He was competing ever since Apex Season 1, had a role swap. He's got an argument for being the best flex support in the game, even though his team was struggling this year. And yeah, this is an absolute tragedy. He will be remembered as not just an incredible player, but just a super nice guy as well. Some of the stuff that we'll show later on as well, like his letter to Poco and the ways in which he interacted with people and left memories with people, competing with both Fusion University and the Fusion team. I don't know anyone who ever had a bad word to say about him. He was just a legend in the game and a wonderful person outside of it who had committed himself to a dream and achieved it and exceeded whatever he thought he would be able to achieve when he was setting out to play Overwatch. So yeah, we've got some highlights and stuff like that, and this tweet as well, which was a translation from Nugget, who had presumably spoken to Alarm's mother or read a tweet or something like that, and the translation saying that Alarm's mother said that she'd like everyone to remember her son as a good player. I will absolutely remember that. And I mean, you cannot argue with that whatsoever, right? That's an absolute legend of Overwatch that's been taken away.
Yeah, one of the best flex sports in the game, for sure. And he was on a fair, like, a crazy hyped team before he joined the Overwatch League as well, obviously Fusion Uni, but before that, Lunatic High and like BK Styles back in Apex, like you mentioned, had that role swap, played main tank a long time ago, and now one of the best supports in the league. And yeah, it's honestly the most tragic news I think the offseason has brought us so far, and it's a devastating loss for the community as a whole.
Absolutely. I think we're all like in a state of shock, really, that this happened. Like it was announced like last night for us, time of the recording. You know, a lot of people have suggested that like perhaps we should rename the Rookie of the Year award. I think that's a very viable like earnest cause and something worthwhile discussing. You know, with the league, see what happens. I think because of what you mentioned, like how important he was to the league, because of his gravity to the league, because he was so good at what he did. I mean, if it wasn't for Philadelphia Fusion struggling with visa issues, trying to get their team in one spot and all that this year, like this guy is like a role star, like for the flex support role, and he was to some, even though they struggled, right? Because he is that good. So he was a huge player for the league, and I expect a lot of good things to come out, whether it's like highlight videos, more about his story, honoring him and what he did to contribute to the Overwatch scene, because he truly deserves it. Like you said, an amazing guy as a person, very well liked, very very fun player to root for. You know, with his big plays, where it's like huge sleep darts, big bionades. You know, he had a bit of that like Reggie Hong kind of presence, that like he's the flex support on this team, and like he stood out on the server. So we'll see what happens moving forward. Incredibly sad news to hear this yesterday.
Yeah, I think Josh, you touched on it a bit, because it's just he was 20.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a ridiculously
Unreal.
young death for any person, no matter the profession, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just insane. Like it's really just, you have to feel really bad for his family there, because he was just really beginning his life. Like, it essentially hadn't even started that much when you think about the total lifespan of a human being. So
Sure. Yeah.
it is really tragic to lose him so early. And I think the easiest wish is what his mom said, is to remember him as a great player, because I feel like that's like the bare minimum in terms of
Sure.
like remember him as a great player,
Absolutely.
because I mean, when I think of like flex support players, to me, he is like the second generation of, like, when you think about how Jonak sort of redefined flex support in season 1, he's like that next generation of supports that stepped after that. That was like so aggressive and so mechanically oriented. They changed, their presence was felt, and their teams was built around them a lot of the times, and how they played. And like, when I remember I was lucky enough to get to cast him when he was playing in North American contenders with Fusion University, and he was just unbeatable. Like, Fusion University just couldn't lose because their back line was the best in the entire region, and probably the best back line all of contenders when they were playing, arguably, when it was Funny Astro and him. So it's kind of a shock, and I think it is definitely something to think about, potentially renaming the Rookie of the Year award after him, because I have no doubt that if he had played another season with some rebuilding efforts, I mean, the guy was just continue to be a superstar. And also, too, like we talked about, just super, super nice guy. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything bad about him ever. Like, no, everyone's walked away with positive experiences. It's clear that he's just like a really earnest individual, like, that just cared about competing and was nice, like, and it's just a tragedy.
This moment as well that we're watching, this is when he found out that he'd won the Rookie of the Year award. He's tearing up in an interview, and he just, what strikes me as well is every player in the Overwatch League, you might not realize it because it's all online and people just look like, you only see them in the webcams and stuff, but they're all not just real people, but people that have dedicated huge amounts of their time, huge amounts of their life to pursuing a passion that they're not sure they're going to turn into a career. And then when it becomes a career, they have to dedicate so much more of their time, so much more of their life to it. I mean, for Alarm himself, competing with Fusion University was competing with a group of people that were very culturally different to himself, moving over to North America, moving away from his family. He did, get to compete for the last year in Korea, right? Because Fusion themselves were over there. But he developed so many friendships with people that were outside of the people that he would have normally interacted with, I assume, when he was, if he had lived a different life in Korea as well. So he is an incredible player, but he's also so much more than a player. He's a young adult that got to pursue his potential and realized so much of it, and yet had a huge amount more to give. It is a complete tragedy.
Bro,
yeah,
been a rough time recently. Some bad news, and I think it's just, I feel like if anyone is feeling hurt about it, I think it's a completely valid thing, because even though you may not have known Alarm, if you're a fan of the team, it's hard not to imagine. I feel like he was as baked into the structure of the team as Carpe at this point. Sure. Like, he was the foundation of the Fusion in many ways, and like their future goals, it felt. So it is just a categorical. It's just a loss in all categories for the league and for the Fusion and for the fans.
And for his family as well. I feel so
and of course,
terrible for them as
family.
well. I can't. I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced loss in some way, but I cannot possibly imagine the loss of losing a child. I just, how can you imagine that? This letter as well, I think is just possibly the cutest thing that's ever been done in the entire history of Overwatch. For people who missed this when it was coming around the first time when it happened live, this was when Alarm was turning 18 and or was on the cusp of it, because this was Overwatch League Season 1. Philadelphia Fusion are going to the playoffs. They're going to the grand finals, in fact, playing against the London Spitfire. And so all of the Fusion University members wrote letters, or at least I think they did, at least Alarm did, wrote letters to the Fusion guys, wishing them good luck. And so this is a handwritten message from Alarm that says, to Poco, he starts it bonjour, which I think is just adorable. I'm Alarm. I don't know if I will go to Fusion or not, but if I join Fusion, I want to be close to you. When I went to the Fusion house for dinner, I was nervous, so I didn't even say hi, and I regret it now. I want to be like you nowadays. I'm going to the gym. Going to the gym with Snillo. I wanted to go to the gym with you together with Snillo and EQO. And you know what? We have the same birthday. I don't know when this letter will get to you, but I hope you will make it to the playoffs. I will cheer you on. Goodbye, handsome guy. And that was his letter to Poco before he joined and played with Poco. The guy also absolutely fulfilled his goal of going to the gym more, because Alarm's low-key cracked. Like, the guy's jacked. He's not just cracked, he's jacked and stacked. He had been going to the gym with a bunch of them, and I think this letter is so cute and encapsulates the kind of relationships he had with the people he played with too. That was his letter to Poco. I don't know whether you guys saw the tweets that Elk put up as well from his time playing with him on Fusion Uni. It's just a collection of photographs where he was playing and dominating essentially with Alarm together in that backline, and just little moments of memories.
Yeah. Like you said, Avast, like he came up with the Fusion University guys as well. Like I felt like he was part of the Philadelphia Fusion, like even before he got promoted to the league. So, I mean, you can see here, like Fusion University back in the day, they were like the contenders team. Like they were like they invested a lot of it. You know, they brought in Alarm and supported them a lot. You can see them here in their hoodies, entire crew, and they were hugely successful in contenders as well, which. Everyone just awaited Alarm being promoted to the Overwatch League. And there's been a lot about this. I mean, I don't know how many listening to this show know as well, but like Pocket's mom passed away this week. Yeah, there's been a lot of very sad news, like you mentioned, Internet Talk 4 years ago. Just
Kickstarter
hug your loved ones. Reach out to
Kickstarter.
Kickstarter, yeah. That was this past month, right?
Yeah, it was very recently.
October. So just awful. Just like hug your loved ones, reach out to your friends, and just make sure to spread more love in the world, because you never know. As awful as it is, you never know. Just spread more love in the world.
And I also just want to finish up by saying as well that for people who are very emotionally affected by this, there's a lot of people in the community who are willing to talk about it, share memories, watch highlights together, just talk generally about their experiences. I know I was streaming when I heard the news, and there was a bunch of people in my chat just offering to reach out to anybody who was particularly hit hard by this. And like Connor was saying, you might not have known him on a personal level. You might not have been able to say, I was friends with Alarm, but just the way in which people interact with their fans, I'm sure a lot of you felt very connected to both him and the Fusion franchise. So if there are people out there, or I mean, as well, if there's people listening to this who are were friends of him, I know like Roston, the manager of Philadelphia, or any of the people that played with him on Fusion University, there's people out there that would be very happy to talk about these kind of things. DMs are always open on my Twitter if people want to reach out and chat. And I'm sure there's more people in the community that would be open to it as well. I agree as well with the idea of the Rookie of the Year award being potentially renamed. Don't want to pressure the league into that, because there might be other ways in which they're thinking of commemorating him. But the idea of having the Kyungbo Kim Rookie of the Year award, I think, is extremely fitting and similar to how Dennis Havelka was honored as well. Two complete legends of the scene, and they will absolutely be remembered. Feels extremely cheesy and cliche to say, but the entire kind of slogan of Overwatch of heroes never die is actually apt in this kind of sense, because the point there being that you remember them for what they were able to achieve and what the kind of memories they gave to you. Okay, well, Sag hours. They do be continuing, though, but in a very different tack, because the next topic that we're going to address here is the news that came out of the shareholder meeting for Blizzard, for Activision Blizzard. There was the news that Jason Schreier reported on. There was Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 are being delayed. Now, how you can delay a game that didn't have a release date anyway, I don't quite know. But this has caused some serious stirrings and more doom and gloom within certainly the Overwatch community, as Overwatch 2 is delayed further. As to when that is going to be, who knows? And they said Mike Ibarra, who is now the sole head of the company after Jen O'Neill has stepped down, said that part of the delays are largely due to changes in leadership, as so many people have been leaving Activision Blizzard. So that's all starts folding together, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. From what I saw from this earnings call, though, or the shareholder meeting, or whatever you want to call it, is the next slide, the next couple of slides was saying, obviously, the Overwatch League is still going to continue as normal, and that's going to be the plan.
Yes.
So at least that is still certain, or relatively certain. Of course, things can change last minute. COVID happened, so anything can happen at this point, I feel. But it's strange. I feel like it's, going off your point, Josh, saying, well, Overwatch 2 didn't have a release date. It feels like this wasn't really needed to be mentioned. Am I the only one that with that sentiment? I
think it's a legal thing for shareholders, Jack. I think when you tell shareholders that you have an expected release in Q3 or Q4 of 2022, of 2022, and then if that gets delayed, I think you have an obligation to tell them that there are delays, because it means that there's going to be an earnings spike at a different period of time, which is going to translate to stock prices. I'm not knowledgeable about this kind of stuff at all.
About right.
But that's my interpretation.
That sounds close enough.
It's because I only bring that up is because if it was like, oh, we're expecting Overwatch 2 to be launched at this quarter, like the whole expecting thing seems, it's not like, okay, it's December 5th it's going to get launched, and then it would have to be reported on that. Actually, it's going to take until July 27th the next year. So that was why at least that's where my head was when the news broke. I was like, it hasn't got a release date. Like, why do you have to announce it's been delayed? Surely you can just continue to make it and not say anything, because with this extremely negative news around Overwatch 2, it's not like, no one has taken this like, yeah, this is great. You know what I mean? Like, no one has been like the upside of the coin where it's like, okay, the game's going to be better. It's going to be more polished. It's like the way CG Product Red would just okay, we're going to delay Cyberpunk. We're going to delay Witcher, whatever, because we want to finish and polish the game a whole ton. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. But with Overwatch, every single time a release date or something around like, oh, maybe the beta will come out or whatever, it's always negative. Like, doesn't matter what the take.
But part of that is because if you're delaying the next Witcher game or something, you're not stopping updates to another live service that you currently have, right? Definitely. So it's just more and more and more time where Overwatch 1 players are going to be playing a game that doesn't get serious updates. This is the response from Andy B, the community manager, as well, where he said, there was a lot of stuff in here that's just like, yes, I understand your frustrations, etc., etc. To me, the only paragraph that actually means anything is this final one that says, one rumor to clear up. Sorry, it's not quite the final paragraph. Second to last. I'm seeing a lot of folks assuming a launch date in 2023 is rote. Without being pedantic, I want to point out that there was no release date or beta date communicated in yesterday's earnings call. While I'm not prepared to discuss dates with you here today, I want to quash the rumor of a 2023 release date as being somehow official. Now, that might be quite pedantic, but the point that here's what the point that I made when I was talking on my stream about it, which is Andy B would not post that to shoot himself in the foot if they really had no intention of doing anything until 2023. The word that speaks the most to me, though, is beta. The fact that he specified release or beta date in 2022, that to me indicates that they've given themselves a wiggle clause where it's like, okay, the actual game may well be releasing in 2023, but we'll have a beta available at some point in 2022. And that way we as the developers can say, well, actually, You know, don't believe everything you hear about 2023. You'll still get to play it before then. So that I could see that world still being.
See, I just
plausible.
read that and read it as interpreting that they might be open to delaying till 2024 and not necessarily 2023.
I mean,
What?
No,
I mean,
the
that's
thing
crazy.
is, I mean,
I'm kidding, I'm
possible.
kidding.
That's possible.
I'm-
You know,
I'm-
it's
Yeah,
definitely
technically possible, but
God,
I'm-
wouldn't that be so funny? He's like pedantically saying, actually, it's not going to be 2023, it's 2024.
No, I mean, I'm
Isn't-
kidding.
Oh, dude,
but-
as April Fool's next year, they just need to say Overwatch 3 is coming in a couple of years or something. Just go, hey, by the way,
Yeah.
Overwatch 3 is in the works too, baby. Let's go.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I'm just curious about like why they're delaying at this point, because they're not delaying because of the PvP portion. There's no way they're delaying.
Are you sure?
It has to be the PvE.
Did you see the playtest we saw?
playtest did
for
not
grand
look
finals at
finished.
Overwatch? I mean, that looked
No, it didn't.
extremely
It didn't look,
bare bones, and that was mere months ago, right?
yeah, I mean, it
So-
didn't look finished, but I think they have. I would be more happy to assume that they have things like in place for even the heroes they didn't showcase at that playtest, but they just like weren't ready to reveal it to the public quite yet. But I'm just saying, like, it feels like producing Overwatch 2 PvP is way more streamlined than the PvE side, which is sort of like game design balance, you know,
Sure,
systems
yeah.
design, like how do you like, are we gonna have a ranking system? Are we gonna have a guild system? You know, what is there to PvE? Are we gonna have gearing? Are we gonna be able to earn sprays or new characters, models, like whatever? There's so much to the PvE side of things that I could totally see being like, hey, we need to delay this. We're gonna make this like the best game in the world. We're gonna make this the biggest game in the world. It's gonna have so many elements to it. Okay, that takes time. It takes a shit ton of time to figure out what is the best course of action and how you're going to go through with that. But the PvP side, like, you know how long it takes to make a map, and then you kind of wrap it up, and you do that. And then with a hero, it's like, yeah, it takes some time to brainstorm, but like you can wrap it up. It's way easier to like put out like a roadmap and a time plan for the PvP side of things, because the what goes into PvP I find more streamlined. Now they might disagree with me because they're actually professionals, they're game developers. Maybe I'm being quite rude here to them and their craft. But it's like how long do we need before we can get some PvP content in here? And we don't have to go there straight, like out of the gate, like right now. But like, what does this mean for Overwatch League in next year as well? It's like, how long do we have to wait for like Overwatch 2 PvP to come out?
I think we should move on to that topic as well, though, because Jack was talking about it too. What this means for so both journalists reach out to Blizzard, and Blizzard have said it themselves. Overwatch League 2022 is still planned to be on Overwatch 2 beta when it begins in April. They have not changed those plans because of this reported delay to the actual game being released, but that would logically conclude that there's going to be an even larger period of time where the public does not have access to a game and the Overwatch League does. What does that mean for contenders? What does that mean for trials? What does that mean for public interest? I think people are just going to be pissed off watching a game that they can't play if there's no way of getting into a beta.
Do you remember
Only
Only Watch?
Yeah.
Yeah, does everyone remember that? We were all there for that. I mean,
But that wasn't
how
even
long
that
did Only Watch last? It was like a month, maybe 2?
Yeah, I think it was November and December of 2015. Was it?
Yeah,
Something like that.
Because I distinctly remember DMing Flame for beta access key. I do distinctly remember that time back then, because Flame for some reason was the arbiter of keys in the Overwatch Pro Discord and was able to give them out to a lot of people. And it was definitely around that time. It was like 2 months, and I remember people were pissed, but it was a short time frame still. It was like an edging, like of leading up to like then you could explode out into the real game, and like there was like people were upset about it, and it's also been attacked. People have also criticized it for things like Valorant too. When Valorant did its initial release, and it was only the content creators, the big ones first, that were playing, people were upset about that too. Now the difference is for Valorant, they did drops. They did drops, yeah. And also it was a huge move in terms of generating interest on Twitch and on various platforms initially by activating with that. So there are valid reasons, but the thing is that we're looking at a very different time frame here, right? As opposed to like a month to 2 months to potentially 6+ months. Or like, who knows
that would
exactly.
be insane.
We don't know. We just don't know, right? We have no idea.
Let's think about this somewhat. From the information that we have available, Overwatch League 2022 is going to begin on Overwatch 2. We know that. We also know that because of this reported delay, it's almost certainly going to be the Overwatch 2 release there's no world in which it releases while the league is running. If the league ends in normal time, somewhere around August,
I
September.
don't think that's true though.
But the beta might be released. But I mean the actual release date, there's no world in which it overlaps with Overwatch League.
Why wouldn't it?
Because because the initial release was somewhere around Q3 and they've just said it's further delayed. I mean, best case. Some people are saying 2023. Even if you buy into what Andy B is saying, and he's like, "Oh, it's actually maybe going to be like Q4 or something." Or even if it was Q3, there's almost going to be zero overlap. Even in the absolute best case, huffing the hopium scenario, there's almost going to be no overlap with the public being able to play Overwatch 2 on an actual release and the season going on. Now they might be able to play a beta. But how many months of beta do you have before a release? You don't have normally 6 months of it, do you?
Maybe? I mean, and also, is this even a beta that we're playing? Because based off the playtest that we saw earlier, and also based off the news of this delay, is this going to be a beta or an alpha that Overwatch 2, Overwatch League is going to be on, right? In terms of its release, we don't know the extent, right? My personal opinion, if it's anything similar to the build quality that we saw at the playtest for the pros played at the end of last year, that's an alpha. That's not a beta, in my opinion. That feels like an alpha to me. It doesn't feel very polished. But unless they have a bunch more characters, reworks, and maps waiting in the wings, and along some other quality of life changes in related to Overwatch 2, that felt more like an alpha to me. But obviously, that's because of a lack of content we saw. But also, I think people are a little. It is good in some ways that this earnings report and call came out because the fact I think some people were hoping huffing the hopium a little bit, because I think the kind of the expected thing that was going to happen no matter what was that next year we were going to start. Everyone was pretty much expecting, at least on the inside, that we were going to be on an Overwatch 2 beta build, or at least a portion of Overwatch League next year.
Oh, absolutely.
That was everyone was sort of expecting that. The real thing was just more so, were we going to get Overwatch 2 in the middle of next year or something? And now that's kind of been dispelled as extremely, extremely unlikely. So I think that is good, but it is a very worrying thing about what the game is going to look like. How is it going to? What is the public going to respond to it? And most importantly, what is the date between this build that Overwatch League is playing on and the release?
Yeah, I mean, my copium chamber has taken a massive hit. The glass has cracked and it's leaking out. It's pretty bad at this point, because I genuinely thought my copium was that I thought that if we get Overwatch 2, and they announced that a couple of months ago for next year of Overwatch League, and if that somehow coincided with an actual release of Overwatch 2, and then if you did a Valorant drop system or some kind of that, if you had some kind of build up, not even release the game as Overwatch League starts, but as you mentioned just here a couple of minutes ago, it was some kind of build up to it that made sense.
Yeah,
I think that could have been great for the game, for the franchise. Yeah. Because it's a marketing thing as well. You get Twitch streamers involved, you build up the Twitch directory, and you get all these people involved, and people are hype about it, and you have all this content coming out with the game, the PvE side, more heroes, more maps. That's a massive marketing opportunity and an incredible rollout for how you want the game to actually roll out when it comes to acquiring new players and getting them involved. Now, with the game being delayed, and we have this big question mark. What's going to happen with Overwatch League and Overwatch 2? And we applied all these terms like beta, alpha, it's going to be incomplete. How much of the game are we getting? I find that a massive stain on the Overwatch League and the Overwatch franchise, because there's no good way to salvage this now. If we're going to end 2022 and call it the Overwatch League beta season, or the Overwatch League incomplete season, you use these terms that generally leave a pretty sour taste in your mouth, that's just going to affect the view of reflect poorly on the league, because we're half-assing it and we're not getting a complete product. So it's a bit of a marketing nightmare, to be honest with you, and I'm quite disappointed that we aren't getting that perfect flow of new releases and leading the franchise into some new glory days. Instead, now we're gonna half-ass it. Well, you get maybe Overwatch League pros, they get to play the beta bit, maybe some only watch for a couple of months. Who knows what the distribution is gonna be if a potential alpha beta comes out, whatever. It's a huge mess. So it's taken, it's taken a massive toll on my copium
reserves
have
been hit hard.
Oh yeah,
hit hard.
It's a struggle.
Yeah.
So something I've been thinking about actually recently is that I think Overwatch in a way is almost, it got released at a weird time. I just looked up the original release date of Fortnite because I think Fortnite and games like League of Legends, I think you could say as well. Obviously, League of Legends was much earlier, and it was definitely at the time like a one of a kind game. Not in terms of like MOBA, but like how it operates as a title. It's free to play. You buy champions, skins, and shit, and it's more of like a live service game. Like League of Legends, I'd say is one of the first ones to adopt that. But like Fortnite, the Battle Royale released in September 2017. I think Overwatch releasing just before that, it is just kind of, it was on the cusp of basically every popular title having a live service to it. So when the game got a couple of years older, Fortnite got released, you had like Apex, you had Warzone, you had all these other games that were like more live servicey. Overwatch was in a weird space where you had to buy the game, you got all the heroes for free, and then there were obviously updates for new heroes, new maps, and etc. And then at some point, I can imagine then they started to develop on Overwatch 2 very slowly. But I think with the market moving towards more this live service, people expected so much from Overwatch. I'm not going to give it a pass because, yeah, recently there hasn't been content updates. Those weekly challenges and stuff, that's
got a Cassidy challenge this week,
dude,
guys.
That is the smallest bit of like live service.
Hey, but it says new in it. That's new content.
It does, and it has a skin you can't get after that. Hey, bro, if you want to grind that quick play, you do that. But it is, and like, what is the most recent multiplayer map that's not a deathmatch map as well?
I actually don't know.
Overwatch.
What is the answer to that?
I was talking to Scott the other day. We think it was Paris or Havana, like one of those.
Yeah,
and like,
I think it is one of those.
Yeah,
it was so long ago, I can't even remember which came first.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's insane, right? And like, people got so used to this live service aspect of 99% of popular games now that everybody was like, what the fuck, Overwatch? Why aren't you doing the same things as Apex is doing, as Warzone's doing, as fucking Fortnite's doing? They're updating it so much, to be fair, though. You know, we've heard the stories about Epic Games and their employees working to the grindstone, trying to get as much Fortnite content out as possible. You know,
right, because the people at Blizzard are living a great life as developers, right? There's nothing bad happening over there.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it loses some credibility in that.
Sure, okay, but I think everybody kind of expected Overwatch to follow that as well. But I think initially the Team 4 and like the developers of Overwatch didn't really want it to turn into this massive live service thing where they're releasing updates every few weeks, every few months, you know, every 2 or 3 months, you know, with a new character, new skins, or whatever the fuck, right? So I think Overwatch in that regard, it's fallen by the wayside because it's not a live service game. But like, it was also a little bit too early for it to be in this massive trend of live service games, and people kind of expected.
But wasn't their stated goal still to do like the hero releases when Overwatch released anyway? So there were still live service components baked into it from the beginning, no matter what, right?
Sure.
So I find it weird that it's like that's where we draw it draws the line. It's like, you guys will have a live service, but only a little bit.
I think it's more the frequency compared to like a lot of other games, and like the consistency of these a lot of other games too. I'm not sure the developers or anybody Blizzard at that time was like, yeah, Overwatch is going to be a completely live service and we're just going to continually update it, because you wouldn't release a number 2 if that was the case, right? It would just be like a massive overhaul update for the game. And
they also, I mean, the biggest problem from the community's perspective is that they halted everything for Overwatch 1 while working on Overwatch 2. That's the biggest problem.
I'm definitely not, 100%. And I am in that camp as well. I do have a problem with them like not updating the game. I'm just like trying to give another perspective on that.
No, I understand. But I think from the community's perspective, if the development time had been short for Overwatch 2 and the game had come out with all of these big things, there wouldn't be as much furor over it. But the fact that the game has been just left with tiny amounts of new content, a couple of sprays, a couple of skins, stuff like that, and no new heroes, no new maps. Those are those things all being put into Overwatch 2, and yet it getting pushed back and back has just left the current player base lacking.
I mean, I've heard from several people, like streamers and people who play the game, that like, this is the worst ranked season yet. And I think that they started a new ranked season like this past week or something like that. Like, that it's like the worst one yet. Like the the players are feeling fatigued from just getting blue balled the entire time about new updates and Overwatch 2 being released and all this like new exciting stuff. And it's like, it's not surprising that happens. Like, imagine if you had like a 10-year-old car and then you're just like happy driving around like it's a car, you get you places, but then you always have someone saying like, hey, next week I'll get you a Porsche, next week, and then you just kept getting stalled. It's like, no, sorry, didn't come in this week, sorry, like supply, we couldn't get it going to you, but next week you'll have your Porsche. Like, suddenly you hate this fucking 10-year-old car because you just want to get to the Porsche, you just want to get this new one. So it's no surprise that like the player base is feeling some kind of fatigue over this, or constantly hearing about delays, you're not gonna get the new game, and yeah, like the player base is frustrated, and it really impacts the active part of the game. Those who have stuck around, like eventually they're just gonna go play Apex. They're just gonna go play other stuff because we get delays all the time instead of good, better, new things coming out. Didn't they say when they released 5v5s, like, hey, we're gonna do monthly updates? Now, yeah, sure, there was like a massive scandal in between. The company has taken big, steps to try to repair their culture from what something was obviously unacceptable and unacceptable workplace, and that has taken some of that focus and emphasis. World of Warcraft has done similar things. They delayed some of their like new content patches and worked on other stuff because the priority was to, hey, we need to fix the workplace. And I understand if that was the case for Overwatch 2 to an extent, but still, like there's just always delays, and the player base that doesn't get it like any good news whatsoever or any like new surprises. We did get this for the grand finals, which of course is some nice like new gameplay, but it's nothing like revolutionary. Like, we saw a push map and then we saw some like regular maps, and it's like no insight. I suppose
I like that they gave us this for sure, but we need to hear more. And I don't buy the whole, we're really busy working on our internal development improvements as well, because Blizzard have done almost nothing from the outside, nothing you can see from the outside to solve that kind of stuff. They're now set up in a place where they've got another, again, like the woman Jen O'Neill that was put in co-leading of Blizzard has now stepped down to deal with a non-profit that works for women in gaming, and it's just left another man at the top of the chain again. And I just, it's all PR stuff, right? You don't want to release big updates because they're just going to get drowned in the bad shit the company has been done overall. I don't really buy that they haven't had time to do the developer updates because they're busy on other stuff. It's just they don't want to do them because of the PR implications. But that just leaves everybody in an even worse spot.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. And on top of that, there's I mean, it's not even beginning to talk about the fact that I just how does this, I don't even understand how the player base is supposed to get by when we have no content for another year coming up potentially for Overwatch 1. Like it's mind-boggling that we're at that point, and it's weird that we haven't found a solution to where like, well, can't we dedicate like some portion of a team to make Overwatch 1 content, or like anything at all in this case, because it's just ridiculous. But also now I'm at the mindset to be like, okay, fuck it, like it's the great reset. Here it is. We're at the Fermi barrier of all life, all intelligent life, and like pretty much we either sink or swim. And it's just like, it's just literally just what happened with Overwatch in 2017 when also the ecosystem died, all the tournaments were gone, and Overwatch League came out, and Overwatch League was like, okay, we've killed everything else. Overwatch League is the only thing. And if it failed, the game would have been dead immediately right there. Luckily, it did pretty well, so the game didn't die. But it feels like we're just repeating that same exact scenario, but with Overwatch 2 now, which is even worse, because now we're not even talking about an esports ecosystem anymore, though obviously it's included in part of it. Now we're talking about, literally, does the franchise survive in the context as it has? And also, if it doesn't, and even if it maybe like stagnates, I feel like this has to be the most fun. With the release of like Arcane from League of Legends now, Overwatch has to be one of the most mismanaged IPs ever. Imagine where was our Overwatch TV show? Where was our Overwatch movies? Where was all this shit? Like back in 2016 and 2017, Overwatch was a cultural zeitgeist. You couldn't go anywhere without someone being dressed up as Tracer or some shit, Like you literally couldn't do it. So I feel like it's just insane that we haven't had the amount of cultural impact that could have been there.
It's unbelievable.
And felt is just completely wasted.
The game is still not free to play, and there's been no plans communicated about that as well, despite that being one of the most important things for having a game be like a popular title at this point in time.
That is super interesting to me, because the amount of codes that were given away for like Overwatch is just astronomical. They had a humble bundle like multiple times of Overwatch codes. I know a lot of the teams as well in the Overwatch League. If you sign up to their newsletter or sign up to the Overwatch League newsletter, you got a code for the game. And I'm like, well, this is just the beginning of it going free to play. Like, you're giving away so many codes for the game. Dude, I've probably
it was right around
Boston Uprising email.
It was right around BlizzCon 2019. I remember there was a huge push, lots of codes going out. I remember.
Dude, I think I have 2 codes still from the fucking Boston Uprising. Like that will say, oh, here's a code for Overwatch.
Yeah, they were giving out codes like fucking crazy around.
I got 5 accounts anyway. I don't need a 6th. But you know, it made sense that it was like, well, fuck it, dude. Like, they're just giving away so many games for free. Like, it's going to go free to play in the next few months, or maybe like the beginning of next year or something. It boggles my mind that they still want to charge for the game, even though the player base, at least in ranked, like which is where you ideally want players to play, right? Especially to help a lot of the queue times. Like, just release it free to play. Maybe they don't have the systems ready or behind it. Well, they're not going to have them ready because they're not going to work on it. But to release the game in free to play, it would be a bit crazy considering you only need level 25 accounts to play ranked. So it might be a bit dodgy in that respect. But just release the game, bro, for free, please. Every other game is free at this point. It's on permanent sale too.
Yeah. You're also talking about Overwatch being part of the zeitgeist when it was first released. That's absolutely true. Also, the monthly active users are still fairly solid. There's a lot of talk about the game actually being dead, and sure, there's a lot of people losing interest, and the Twitch viewership is not there, and it's not in the zeitgeist at the moment. It's not defining in terms of a game whatsoever. But the player base is still not disappeared. There's still a fairly solid player base. It's not enormous, but is it comparable with games like Valorant, given both of their most recent numbers? Yeah, it actually is. Valorant's a bit bigger, but it's not hugely bigger. It's not dominating it. And yet Valorant's marketing and interest and viewership is so much higher. And sure, it's a new game, so the growth potential is way higher as well. But that all feeds again into the idea that the basic interest could still be there. It's just about how you manage the product itself and the IP, and it does feel like it's been mismanaged completely. I want someone to sell me on the Copium
League section about this at all. We didn't really talk about the Overwatch League implications about this. I want
someone to sell me on the Copium. What's the best case scenario for Overwatch League 2022? I don't mean format, but I mean in terms of how that Overwatch League 2022 and Overwatch 2 interact. What is the best case scenario that you could sell me? Huff some copium. What's the best reality you can come up with? Like Doctor Strange it for me.
I think something that I've been thinking about, because I've been thinking about that situation a lot, and like the best case scenario is that you have a couple of, say, for example, we do those tournaments again, Melee and shit. You do those, obviously on Overwatch 2. Maybe the first 1 or 2 tournaments, preferably only 1, is played without any drops, any beta access or anything. And then the next tournament, beta codes start rolling out, or like big content creators, name all the fucking big ones that did the Valorant event, that kind of thing. They get the codes, and then it's almost exactly the same as Valorant did, because I think that was an enormous success in the way that they did ended up dishing out the codes. Although it was very funny watching your Twitch chat, Josh, actually just go ballistic. It was the funniest shit I've ever seen, honestly. But
where my key? Where is my key, streamer?
Give me key. Give me a prime. Maybe I'll give you a key, buddy. And I think that is probably the best way to do it. That is the biggest copium I can huff right now, is that they just give the big content creators on the second tournament keys, or they just release keys after watching.
And to nail down into the specifics of that, that would be around the June Joust kind of area. So we're talking like middle of June kind of time, a beta that would be closed beta at that point because you need an invite to get into it. So June, and then we're looking limited, 6 months probably before the game is released. So that's a 6-month beta. So best case scenario that you've cooked up is a closed beta that begins 6 months before the release, roughly.
You could even do it in a sense. You could do like timed keys and limited keys as well. So like you've got the key and you can play it for the entirety of the tournament's length, for example. And then it takes a break. You can't play the game anymore. And it's only a limited amount of games too. Or sorry, a limited amount of keys as well. So it creates more hype. And then as the year progresses, you've given away more keys and more people can play it. And then it's kind of a big snowball effect.
It could also piss people off too, as well, when you restrict key access already for a game that's going to be taking so long. I could definitely see a backfire in effect. I mean, but there's no perfect way. There's no perfect way to do it, exactly. But I find for me the best case is that also if we add open tournaments for Overwatch League next year, where people can compete on Overwatch 2 beta in like an Overwatch League ecosystem of somehow. To me, like I understand it's a franchise league still, so we're still gonna have franchise teams, but I would love to see an expansion of like allowing people, if you want to play Overwatch 2, come play the Overwatch 2 beta tournament. Like, let's give some access to some people to come play it in tournament styles to like generate that also redirects to our Overwatch League ecosystem. Right now, obviously, it's the problem with franchising. It's a lot harder to have these open style systems. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly Overwatch League related, but the way I love to do it is like when we did for like, what was it, like the Kanazaka or the Monkey Bubble or the
sure, yeah.
Like where we had Overwatch League players and streamers playing with contenders players, and you had a max number. And it's an Overwatch 2 style tournament.
And you have streamers in there streaming their comms. People come and watch it.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that would be a great idea.
To me, I feel like that's because there's no good option. Because at the end of the day, the best option we can do is it's all going to be hype building. There's nothing that we can do to terms of like fix people's frustrations for how long the game it's going to take between that time. We can't do anything about giving people access to the game, except if Overwatch League has early builds Overwatch 2, the only way we can give access to them is if we do competitive stuff to have people play it. That's it. Cool. That's the only way to do it. So to me, the only solution here in terms of dealing with this huge fucking colony ship size gap of like we're traveling the cosmos, like we need to play tournaments. We need to play tournaments. We need to have people be able to participate, get their hands on the Overwatch 2 beta build, at least be able to like play the game they're interested in. And then as we get closer to release date, like Jaws said, roll out drops. Start rolling out drops for the Overwatch 2 release date after that. But other than that, I have no other solutions because it's fucked.
I like your idea, though. I hadn't thought about that, but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, you need to reward people, though. Hey, participate in the beta and you get this. Maybe there's like some kind of like
give them unique cosmetics, but we don't even know what the cosmetics are going to be.
You don't
like
think it's its own reward being able to play Overwatch 2? I think that is its own.
No, I
think
think it's going to be. I think it's going to like phase out or fade out like incredibly fast. Like I think if you get your hands on Overwatch 2 beta and that's going to be our Overwatch League season, and you get your hands on it and you maybe play it for like a couple of weeks because it's a beta, right? Like it's not a complete game. Like you're just logging into a separate client and you're just like playing PvP on like a random map you load into, and it's probably going to be like quick play, and like you don't get anything from that. Like I don't see they cannot release Overwatch 2 with PvP only. That's not how you would market it. So we just get like a separate beta alpha client with like no substance to it.
But,
and I think
Jonathan, I wanted to ask you the question as well with all of this, copium flowing in the air. Do you think the beta version that Overwatch League 2022 is going to be playing on will have all heroes? And do you think it'll have new heroes?
I don't think it should have. I don't think it should have. I think if you release Overwatch 2, yeah, sure, you'd want some of the default characters, like we currently have in Overwatch 1, but you'd almost need to treat the Overwatch League season as like a marketing ploy to set up Overwatch 2 when that eventually gets released. So, hey, we kick off stage 1 of the 2022 season. We got 2 new heroes we're unveiling for you, and you can log into the beta and maybe you can play this and play around with them. Next up, June Joust. We got 2 more heroes and maybe a new map, and like we're unveiling it as the season goes on, and you can get your own key on the stream, etc. You can get involved, and like we're gradually releasing more and more to the public. And if you watch the Overwatch League, you'll get like tidbits, you'll get some new information, and you'll be part of the unveiling of Overwatch 2 and what it will be, especially the PvP side. But like otherwise, if it's not that, then like I don't like really want it. I think it's going to be bad for the marketing of Overwatch 2. Like I'd rather just like stall off and play Overwatch 1, because if we just get everything in some beta client, and I think that's going to be pretty poor marketing, and I think people will not buy into the hype, and I think they grow bored.
What about I see a more, I know that we've been talking about like best case scenarios here. What I see as more realistic is that, a beta probably comes out at some point during the league, and maybe some people have access to it. Maybe it's a closed beta. But for the beginning of the year, I think the way that Jonathan's presented things is like an unveiling of the plans. Here's a new hero. You can't play it yet, but here's how it works, and maybe here's how pros playing it. Do you think that would annoy people, or would that be effective marketing? If, for example, let's say Sojourn, because she's the first announced hero that would be coming out, the league kicks off, and it starts with Sojourn. You know, the league begins April. Sojourn is a playable character in this build. Everything is focused around that hero. Next patch, it's June Joust, and there's a different hero. Maybe the pros can't play on it, but like they unveil the new hero and show it to the world. No one can actually play it, but it's just they're trickle releasing stuff over the course of next year.
Yeah,
would that get people hyped, or would that get people's just annoyance raised because they can't do it?
I think if you did that, people would come back and they would continue to play the beta, if there is a beta. They will continue to watch the Overwatch League stream because they'd want their invites. And even if they already have an invite, they'd continue to watch the Overwatch League to see the pros using those new heroes. So I think what you really want from this opportunity to play Overwatch 2 in the Overwatch League next season, you want to get people invested and have them come back. You don't want them for like a singular instant at the release and be like, hey, here you can play this 9 months in advance, a year in advance. I
really like Johnny's idea.
Like, I don't know like how long it's going to be between the Overwatch 2 beta release, or if it even is a beta. Like, we don't even know. It might not be a beta until fucking August,
just speculating.
or November. Like, I don't know, dude. We might never have a beta in 2022. But if that was the case, best case scenario, as you laid it out, I think a gradual unveiling of it would keep people invested in the league, both watching it and coming back and playing a potential client if there was one. And I think that is what you want to build up. You want to gradually build up this player base, get people excited, and then you get the marketing snowball rolling. And then finally, when Overwatch 2 is released, whether it's late next year or 2023, you've already built up this snowball, and that hype is just going to, collide with Overwatch 2 being released. And that's where we finally get released into the heavens. We finally make it. We get all the gold, all the stacks of gold, and we've made it to the promised land.
I actually really like Johnny's idea in the way that you could, Sojourn especially, say if there's the first tournament right in early next year, you do the trailer again, more gameplay footage of the pros, then have Sojourn available for that tournament. And then maybe there's a beta, like Johnny said, with Sojourn available. Next tournament's the same thing, where they do a trailer, pros playing the hero, then they play the tournament with the hero, and then the beta build for that tournament that the viewers could tune in for, get keys for, whatever. That has Sojourn and, I don't know, character A, and then it kind of trickles through and then kind of builds up. I actually really like that idea, because not only does it kind of help with the hype of the game and like building it up, but it actually gives people a taste of the game throughout the year too.
A live service beta. We made it.
Yeah,
live service beta.
These best case scenarios rely on there being some kind of beta that's available for people to play, the developers being willing to showcase the game before it's ready for release, in some cases a long time before it's ready for release, up to 9 months earlier, and there just generally being clear communication and marketing that's directed through the Overwatch League. 3 things that have been a struggle throughout Overwatch's history. But if they manage to, there is still some way of salvaging it. But yeah, the copium reserves are really fucking chugging on the fumes at the moment.
I mean, the smashed glass, to wrap up, like the smashed glass in case of emergency argument, copium, is that like we had some natural growth this past year with the Overwatch League. But even so, like now you're just changing up the variables. It's like, okay, motherfuckers. Now try to grow it naturally while playing on a game that people can't even play themselves. Like we just chopped off an arm of our accomplishments, and now we're gonna do it again. So we'll see. Hey, we grew last year. Maybe we'll grow again this year. We'll see.
Yep.
Who knows?
Well, pass the pipe, brother. Let's head on to let's talk about some Overwatch League news, because it's still the off-season. There's a lot of roster moves going on. Let's start with the London Spitfire. I don't think we've discussed them at all in this off-season. One of the teams that is reportedly not splashing the cash, but they have made some pretty interesting signings. They have 4 new members. Now, off the top of my head, I believe this is Hadi coming back as main tank, Poco coming back as tank. I still haven't fixed that in my vernacular. Poco coming to play tank with Christopher, who's the coach of the London Spitfire. And then they've got Backbone and Provide, who are DPS players. Provide is a support player, but Backbone is a flex DPS player. So those are the 4 new members. I want to start with the tank. I want to start the tanks, I suppose, although only one of them can get played. Let's begin with Hadi. They re-signed Hadi as one of their tanks. What do you think about this? Because this split the London Spitfire fans. Some of them were pretty big fans of him, and some of them thought that he was way under par last year. What do you think?
I think it's a tough situation because I think I remember at the end of Iris's debut for the Atlanta Reign, I was not incredibly impressed with Iris, but he was on high ping. This whole past season, Hadi was on high ping. And also on top of that was playing tank in a team that was not very good. Main tank at that. So when I view it through that lens, and when I've seen what he's done in contenders, and some of his mechanics he even debuted on the Overwatch League stage, in particular in like the final stage of stage 4, there is some potential hope with like, okay, maybe with a different team environment on low, because also from all plans that have been said from like Nuki and other people is that they're hoping to get the London Spitfire team on low ping this next year.
I would bloody hope so. I hope most of next year is not happening online with people playing on 90 ping.
So it could change the narrative a bit around that, and maybe there is more to show. But also, when we remove all that, Hadi also looked abysmal last year at times.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
So
he also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when I was watching him quite a lot, he looked like one of the problem factors for London. It's always difficult to analyze main tank gameplay within the system, but it definitely felt like the decision-making from the tanks was a big problem for them, especially for the first 3 quarters of the year, which is a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a downward spiral, right? Like, if you don't get the resources and the teamwork required, you stop making good decisions and you start making bad decisions because your help isn't there, and you just like go down a downward spiral. But I agree with you. Like at times, like he didn't look Overwatch League capable. But I think this is like a massive vouch. Because we had so many people always talk about how good Hadi was in contenders, and like he was really gonna be stepping up to the Overwatch League level, and then he struggled early on, and people were like, no, like he'll figure it out and he'll be better, and he never got better. Like quite frankly, he was poor like the entire year. So I think the fact that they re-signed him, I'm like, pretty down on it. I'm like, I wouldn't have gone through with this myself. But if you really go through with this, if you sign him once more, that's a massive vouch for that you truly believe that he could be an Overwatch League capable
but it's also
tank.
It's a vouch for a role no one knows what it's going to look like, right?
And like also a vouch for a team that is clearly, from the looks of it, not necessarily changing their front office approach to Overwatch, where it appears a lot of teams, even the Vancouver Titans, are like, okay, we're going big for Overwatch 2. On the Spitfire, like, we're going small for Overwatch 2. So, like, it's just, I do think that it's kind of a flip. I think at its face value, though, no matter what, when you look at this signing, you shouldn't feel confident, in my personal opinion. You should feel like they're getting a second chance. They're getting a second chance to compete again on the main stage, and maybe with a low ping environment, they will prove what they were showed in Tier 2 previously, and the circumstances around this team was not the best to enable them to succeed. But at the end of the day, you should not, I don't feel like objectively anyone should look at this signing and be like, PogChamp, the best main tank on the market, has been signed for the London Spitfire. It's simply a redemption, or a chance for redemption here, I think, for Hadi as a main tank.
But I mean, I agree with you. Like, how many weeks is it? Like, do we give Hadi? I'm like, okay, okay, you re-sign Hadi, fine. You really want to like double down? I'll give you like 3-4 weeks to maybe see if nothing's changed. Overwatch 2 maybe it adapts quickly, gets it going. Like I'm not like straight up just like giving up on it, or straight up just like amazing. I'm not. I give him another chance. Like I give him another chance. You got Christopher coming in. New coach. You got new supports. I mean, one new support like with the team. Maybe he'll come back and like put on some good performances. But I don't have a ton of patience to like sit around and watch London Spitfire and break down how they have tons of potential.
If I see Hadi hyper,
you're in the Overwatch ecosystem, bro. You have to have a ton of patience to be in the Overwatch ecosystem. Come on now.
Yeah,
come on now.
That's true. That's just, I feel like if I see, I'm gonna give them. I'm putting an arbitrary timeline. I'm giving them based off their schedule. I'll give them like a couple weeks, right? And if I see if more than 50% of that time Hadi's hyper feeding on ball, then I'm writing it off, because that's what I watched.
If someone's like, "Oh, you guys are being so rude. You guys are being so mean to the Lone Spitfire," like, "Oh, where's this coming from?" They went 1-15 last season.
Yeah, it was.
It was 1 in
atrocious.
15, and they just re-signed the tank that was like, as we just agreed, like one of their, a problem factor for them last year. So no,
they
I don't have a lot of
denied us
patience
the
to sit
Bread
around and
Bowl
watch
as
London
well.
Spitfire with 1 in 15 last year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well,
and
I
they
have to
denied
see.
us the Bread Bowl.
They
by
denied us the
yeah.
Bread Bowl by winning.
by beating the Titans
bastards.
in a map 5.
The
And that's, by the way,
bastards.
the only team they beat last year was the Vancouver Titans, which were also abysmal. So,
Yeah. Wait, no, wasn't
think-
it Vancouver that denied the Bread Bowl? Because they already won a game before
it?
they headed into the game against
Oh,
London.
no, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're right.
Vancouver denied the Bread Bowl, but still, the only team that Spitfire
won the Bread
beat
Bowl.
was... Yeah, London
they
technically won
won-
the Bread Bowl, and that was their last game of the season, and the only team they beat.
And
was
Connor's got the
Vancouver.
trophy behind him right now, ready to present. to
Yeah,
heaven.
that's it. That's the trophy
Oh
over
my
there.
God.
There's the trophy.
I did say at the beginning of this offseason, I didn't want to comment on pretty much any tank signing because I feel like the role has changed so much. But I can't think of 2 more different tanks that you could sign to a team. The London Spitfires not just re-signed Hardy, but they've signed legendary off-tank Poco, who has been playing the game for so long and has remained an excellent player the whole time, but didn't get to play last year. I still think he would have been a great off-tank last year. He was an excellent player in 2020 when Philadelphia Fusion were looking great. So there's no reason to suspect that he would have been bad in 2021. But again, I have no idea how good this guy's going to be if he has to play a range of what were formerly main tank picks and redesigned heroes and stuff as they head into Overwatch 2. So it's a very weird blend of like one really unproven former main tank player and one very proven veteran pure off-tank player, because I don't think
It
Poco's...
also took a gap year, essentially, too, because he didn't play in Overwatch League at all last year. He played in
Didn't they
contenders.
dominate in European contenders?
Yeah, he dominated.
Like,
They wouldn't play in European contenders, and we're fine. But like, it's just like that's who cares, right? So
yeah,
I think it's a nice insurance policy, though. No, just obviously we don't know what the role looks like in Overwatch 2 with all the changes and whatnot. But I think if you are London Spitfire, you're almost relying on Poco. If Hardy does end up not performing up to their expectations, they can go, well, I mean, we have Poco at least. We can rely on him. I assume he can play a lot of the other tanks. Yes, he's quite a legendary off tank at this point, but the other tanks, they will play differently. But I'm sure Poco could definitely pick them up and learn them to an Overwatch League level and probably beyond a little bit too. And I think for London Spitfire and for the fans as well, they should be looking at Poco saying, okay, at least we have him if Hardy doesn't actually perform up to the expectations and follow this redemption arc that he's going to go on.
Yeah, and I hope, I hope with Overwatch 2 that we get to the point where you can play a lot of different styles. Like if you're Chengdu and just want to play Wrecking Ball all the time, you can make that work in Overwatch 2. If you want to play like Orisa Reinhardt, you can make that work, play more defensive. Like that's the dream balancing, that's, very, very naive of me to think we're actually going to get it perfectly. But Poco would be like one of those reliable tanks in that scenario that like, hey, Lona Spitfire, we're just going to play like Diva, Zarya, Sigma, and we're going to like completely work around that as our play style, as our idea of a team. And Poco would be like a perfect tank candidate, in my opinion, to like support some of their fantastic damage players in Sparker and Shax, right? So it is a very solid signing if Overwatch 2 presents that sort of like game planning and allows them to put Poco in a consistent role to help the rest of his team.
It also seems like if people are going by the playtest with, the idea of there could be double flex support, a lot of people seem to be playing Diva. Like Diva seemed pretty viable in that initial test. So if you're assuming there aren't going to be too many changes, then maybe he is going to be super useful. I was also just bringing up this Reddit thread on competitive Overwatch where someone was essentially putting a summary of what he said on stream after this announcement, where Poco said on stream he had an offer from Paris Eternal at the beginning of the offseason to sign for the league minimum without going through tryouts. But he said he was confident to succeed through trials, so he didn't want to sign without assessing his options and also minimum salary. And then Guangzhou and Boston were interested in Poco. The Gladiators were interested too until Space re-signed. And then Paris and London were the final teams that were interested. He said he didn't really like the 5v5 Paris tryouts. And on the other hand, he likes London's coaching staff, presumably Christopher, who he's worked with before on the Philadelphia Fusion. So, yeah, I thought this was a pretty interesting... Obviously, I'm just going by the Reddit summary there. I'm believing this Redditor in his summary of Poco's stream. because I didn't watch the stream itself, but just some interesting little tidbits. And I like players being that candid about their offers once they've finished the offseason. I think it's really interesting and just adds another
it's a
layer
really
of
nice insight.
Yeah.
Because Guangzhou being interested in Poco, I mean, Poco I think was always going to get offers from various teams, but that is out of left field for me. That's a bit.
I mean, they've had a mixed roster before. They had Nero.
They have
Nero,
yeah.
They had Neptuno.
That is very true.
Yeah, they've had Fraggy. Yeah, they've had
Yeah.
Kid,
Oh,
right?
Fraggy. They did. They had Fraggy and fucking
One map.
Bishu for like a map,
Yeah,
right?
well, I mean, they definitely have
Yeah.
rosters, so it's not that crazy to me. And I feel like Charge have been throwing everything to like figure out their roster direction. Like surely earlier in the offseason, they were like, what the like they didn't know. I think this is more Poco signing is good for the Spitfire because it's a good player, but also more of an indication of like it's an also good pickup. They managed to find Christopher because it gives confidence in veteran players like Poco that didn't necessarily have a ton of options in the offseason. They would be confident at least going to that team. So I think Christopher being there is like good, was probably the main reason that Poco went to Spitfire.
I would imagine so, yeah.
So
outside of the tanks then, I want to address the DPS player next, which is Backbone, a player that's been playing in EU contenders for quite a while. I watched his VODs last season. I can't remember why, because he didn't get signed last season, and I normally only watch the VODs of people that got signed. But he was probably playing with some of the people that got picked up. But I can't exactly remember who it was.
Sheer Cold.
Yeah, but I can't remember who got signed from Sheer Cold last year, because I was watching Sheer Cold VODs in the offseason of leading into 2021. Who was playing for Sheer Cold? I can't remember.
In 2020? In 2020, Sheer Cold had...
It definitely had...
They didn't have anyone that got signed, as far as I'm aware. I'm looking through it.
Wait, they had...
I swear they had someone.
Oh, no.
No? Am I off my trolley? Maybe I was just watching their VODs because they were playing against people that got signed then. I don't know. Anyway, this guy seemed pretty decent.
There was Asking, I should say. Asking came from Sheer Cold technically, but he was with them in 2021 though. So I don't think that's even the case. So I have no idea.
Well, maybe I'm misremembering then. But I did watch a couple of VODs of this guy. He seemed pretty talented. He seemed like a decent pickup if you wanted to dip into EU contenders players. I think he's been one of the top flex DPS picks from EU contenders for a while. There've been other players as well that have been, either that he was competing against last year or competing against this year that are also viable candidates. But this seems like a no-brainer for a London Spitfire team that wants to bolster up some more EU talent and some more British talent as well. Because he's British, right? Backbone?
Woo! Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's a pretty decent player, it looks like. I've seen some gameplay of him. I think he's pretty decent. I think he has room to grow. He's a lot of room to grow. I think it's his first like real tier 1 experience, obviously. He's not obviously a rookie. So a lot of room to go for this player, I'd say. It's kind of very reminiscent of like just what we're looking at is we're looking at European contenders players that have not had a lot of major stage time at all, and they mostly could find their region. So it's going to be a trial by fire, I think. I think it's kind of just hoping that they can grow into something better. Personally, I do think he's a pretty solid flex DPS, but I wasn't particularly I didn't really think they were like going to be the next Kevster or anything like that, right? Like not someone that's going to blow us out of the water by any means.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be benched in favor of Sparker for the most time until like they need like a double flex kind of thing for this team, because I think they'll play Sparker and Shax for the most part of their Overwatch League experience, and then you have Backbone on the bench, sort of like a flex hybrid, I suppose. Like instead of playing Hitscan, he hybrid as in like the player hybrid who played for London this past season. The Backbone you can sub him in if you need two flex players. But it's London Spitfire is a weird team to talk about this offseason because we hyped them up so much going into last year and like how good they were in contenders, British Hurricane and all that, and they just like fell flat in the Overwatch League, and now they're kind of like doing the same thing, but instead of like a complete team bringing up the British Hurricane, they're picking up individual pieces, including Provide, which we'll talk about next, even though that was NA. But you're picking up these individual players, and like even Paris Eternal, even though we praised their success this past year, like there's not a ton of like hurrahs and celebrations to make about these players being promoted and like how good they were in the league. So I think it's a bit of a wait and see. See
I
how
think
much
Backbone has more
can have
of
in the
a
league.
fit in this team than that though, because he does play more of the traditional flex characters that Sparker doesn't play. Like he plays like Echo and things like that, which we haven't really seen Sparker play. So he has more of a role in terms of like outside of just double flex DPS, because I don't think Sparker has played all the projectile heroes that Backbone has.
But he could. That's like how
he could. I mean, maybe, yeah. If they want. But also, when you've seen, I think also the same thing goes for Shaxx, where it's like he's amazing at Tracer. He's pretty good at some stuff. His hero pool it seems like his hero pool is still a little untested at points when I look at Shaxx.
Yeah, definitely.
So I feel like when I look at this roster, it's a little bit more up in the air of where Backbone fits, especially considering his current hero pool.
Sure. I just see Sparker, like I envision him becoming like a Pelican kind of level that can play most heroes, or like like you said, like a Kevster. Like I think Kevster.
That's bold.
Or Sparker. No, not maybe like none of that level, but like the hero pool, like in terms of like what he can do for the Spitfire. I
like
think
an actual
Sparker could
hyperflex
grow
player.
into that role.
Yeah, possibly. I think he's going to be tapped just by the ceiling of this team in general, though, because no matter, I mean, if you're looking at the offseason overall, London Spitfire have got to be up there for your pick of like potentially bottom 3 again, something like that.
Granted, we haven't seen like any. There's still a lot of teams that are not finished and we don't know, so we're not totally certain of where they're going to stay yet. But it's not, of the teams moves we've seen so far, it hasn't looked like the strongest.
The fuck is that tweet that's just come up tagging me in the bottom, the top of that contenders VOD? What? I think Smex has really leveled up at protecting his backline because of all the practice he's had, rescuing Sideshow from bears and defending their raft from birds.
Dominated on contender stream. Ratioed on the contender stream, unlucky.
April 2nd.
I'm getting rolled for my raft gameplay in a contenders broadcast I didn't watch in April. Okay?
As you should.
Free clout, no worries. Tune into twitch.tv/sideshow to watch me play Valheim, I guess.
Okay, bro.
Yeah, get saved.
Yeah, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, well, let's talk about the final player as well then. So the final player that the London Spitfire have picked up in this offseason is their first support player that they've added to the team. It's Provide, who previously went by the name Slur, who previously went by the name Ruxmus or something like that, and who was originally going to be picked up last season, I believe, or maybe it was the season before, I can't quite remember, it must have been the season before.
It was a season before because
2019, right?
Season before, yeah.
2019 Valiant, he was going to be picked up, and then he got dropped. I don't know whether the league failed to approve his contract or whether the Valiant themselves just realized that he'd had screenshots everywhere of him saying horribly racist shit, and not just in the way that like an edgy 14-year-old might say it in some Modern Warfare lobby, which again is still not tolerated and shouldn't be, but this was like targeted to people,
and pretty vile too. Beyond just
incredibly vile, not just racist stuff, just like actual spewing of hatred, and that was back in 2018. So when you're thinking about the LA Valiant signing him, that was 1 year later. At this point, we're 3 years on, and this signing has certainly split a wedge. I mean, it's not the biggest signing in the world, so it's not like everyone's talking about it, but anyone who's weighed in on the topic has been split down the lines of, we should give people like this another chance, and people saying, fuck off, get them out of here. Why are you enabling them to... Why are you saying that that's acceptable if you just go quiet for a couple of years and then try and get back into a position of not just privilege, but also like being put up on a pedestal where people look up to you and are fans of you and stuff as well. So, what do you? I know that Nookie, the GM of, I think she's the GM, right, of the London Spitfire, said, put out a tweet saying she believes people can change. She believes in second chances. Presumably that's why she picked up Hadi again as well. But this is a very different kind of second chance for somebody like Provide. It's you're assuming that he's had the growth from the age of 20 to 23, that he no longer attacks people online, spewing racist and vitriolic shit at them just for fun.
Yeah, I think also when you brought the point of an edgy 14-year-old, like that's the thing. This guy was not 14. He was 20. He was 20 when all this controversy happened. And I think being 20, you should probably know not to say that stuff, because it's one thing if it's like there are definitely ex pros in the past that have been 20 years older that have made like distasteful jokes. This was not jokes. They did not read when you go back and look at the imagery and the text logs. It was never jokes. It was like the type of stuff that is clearly not ever meant to be funny. It's just supposed to be hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're 20 years old, and so when I look at it, it's like I do think because I have known people growing up in the South of the U.S. I have known people that have been also have had really deplorable / ignorant views and said very ignorant, awful stuff. And then in the span of a couple years, they realized how awful they were being. But also, they weren't public figures with their life being analyzed and like supposed to be brand models that you're going to come back. And also, at the end of the day, I don't expect anyone that they ever treated that way should ever expect to forgive them. Nor should anyone that with this Provide signing, should anyone have to forgive Provide for what he said, is my view. Because I think London Spitfire made a terrible PR move here. I think no fan should ever be expected to forgive him or expect him to be a good person after what he said as an adult, a very of age adult. And it's an overall kind of like dumb move. Now, could Provide be is Provide a pretty talented player from what it seems like? Yeah. Was it worth this signing? And like, and also how is anyone supposed to know he's changed? He hasn't said shit. He hasn't he's made a Twitter post. Like, I think overall what we're splitting down the middle is like, well, should people never be able to redeem themselves, right? Is kind of like, that's the moral argument that's being put forward here is like, well, it's been 3 years ago and he was still pretty young. And like, should no one ever be able to be allowed to change? And I think, yes, people should be allowed to change and live their life, but it doesn't mean you have to be an Overwatch League player, is the general rule of thumb.
And also, maybe you can't change, but then you'll have to prove it. Like,
yeah,
it's up to you. It's like you put yourself in this mess, and now it's you have to prove that you're actually changed and you believe other things, whether it's like going through, societal actions and like, different initiatives, charities, that kind of stuff, and really like making that known to the public. Because even like if the argument is like, hey, he shouldn't have to go through all of that to like, earn himself a chance in the league. I kind of think like, yes, that's like part of you getting opportunity to like play in the league and like people accepting you and welcoming you and rooting for you and cheering for you. Like, you put yourself in a mess and now you have to clarify that. Now, supposedly, he has taken some actions using like his social media and whatever to like try to go through that, especially like during the Black Lives Matter drama that happened in 2020 and that whole societal thing that happened in the United States during COVID. Like, apparently he did do some contributions and try to be part of that. I don't know to what extent, because I haven't personally like investigated to that capacity. But I absolutely think that like if you're divided and torn on this topic, and you as a fan or a listener of the show, or like where you feel like you personally aren't able to support that, I think that's a perfectly capable like stance to a legitimate stance, I should say, to have when it comes to this. I wouldn't have signed Provide based on his prior statements. I think it was a pretty bad move by the London Spitfire. But if you're now saying that it's like he's a changed person and like he's different now and like he's gone through all this, then you have to prove it. It's up to you as an organization and as a player to actually prove that, and prove that you've changed and you have different views now and you're not doing it anymore. Because other people coming in and vouching for you, saying like, oh, he was like the greatest teammates, I love playing with him, like he's so caring, he takes care of it. It's like, no, that has nothing to do with it, because that's not the same environment whatsoever compared to someone like where he would actually use some of these slurs or say some of this stuff. So I think it's a very like dividing subject. And I think it's up to the London Spitfire and Provide himself now. It's okay, you're going to be in the league, you're going to play here, you're going to have people like look up to you, be fans of you, and you're going to be part of this whole thing we've built up. It's up to you to do your work to represent this league and represent your team and represent yourself and everyone watching in a very acceptable way. Because otherwise, there's no need for you. We don't need you here. And I definitely think to some degree he has to buy into that if he wants to be part of this.
Well,
yeah, also, I'd have no problem with him, by the way, if it was just like I said, like maybe some edgy jokes when he was younger, even like 20, when he was same age, 20, or like said some like slightly edgy humor, right? Because sure, you're being insensitive, but there's room to go from there. There's plenty of room to be like, okay, like he was young and stupid, and like maybe wasn't as culturally, sensitive as he should have been, and it was bad and it was ill-informed, but it's redeemable still. But his language was not jokes. His language was very, very targeted racist stuff, which to me as an adult
with the intent to harm and attack
hurtful.
people,
and it's a very different like game. I would not be up. I would be like, okay, like it's an interesting move, but like there's room to grow there. For this, it was extreme enough to where I feel very a little disappointed in the signing, honestly, but. It was 3 years ago. I have known people that have also been very, very ignorant in their lives that have turned it around after many years. But the difference was they weren't under a microscope and they weren't trying to be a public figure and expect everyone to welcome them in. Under this, it's like, and sometimes
and it is a public-facing job. It's a public-facing job with different expectations, so you have to be aware of that. I want to move on here as well to a Halo report, which was that MCD is getting signed by Boston. So Boston Uprising already have. They have somebody else in flex support at the moment as well that I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, they're supposedly holding on to Faith and Crimzo.
That's the one. Thank you. So they have Faith and Crimzo in the backline already, and then Halo's reported that MCD is reportedly being signed as well. MCD most recently was cut from, I think he was like a cut or benched from the Spark in their playoff
He was released.
Run. Yeah, he was fully released.
Yeah.
Because of comments he'd made attacking Chinese players that he was playing with in ranked, and like some Owl pros came out saying that he'd been racist towards them as well, and he'd been actively, again, abusive to them on the basis of their nationality. So cool. There's just Boston dipping into it as well. It does feel like there's enough people that we would be able to have more severe consequences for that kind of behavior. No, I feel like I feel like that's not an out there statement, that there's enough flex support talent available that you could have larger consequences of, I'm going to give this guy a pass. And it might even make sense for somebody like Boston because of the PR.
Yeah, and Boston still have Faith in Crimzo. Seems like a bit of a weird pickup. They still have two very good players. I'm not sure why they'd be picking up MCD, just going on the circumstances and the PR. I mean, yeah.
I guess he's just a backup double flex support
player.
He
is a good player, is the thing. MCD is a good player. He's a good player.
He is a good player.
And no one's doubting, no one's saying MCD or even Provide are bad players. They just have done some extremely shitty stuff.
Well, that's the thing. MCD's was like recent too. Literally this past season it happened. Yeah. And also from a business perspective, it's very interesting to me because of the fact that like he specifically insulted the largest market, specifically China and Chinese people, and his rants.
He was on a Chinese
and while being on a Chinese organization.
There's a very different thing between insulting China and the way it does its politics and stuff like that, and insulting Chinese people and players for being Chinese. There's a massive difference between the two of them. He's not providing a written critique of the Chinese political party. He's attacking and harassing players that he plays with for being born there, for having to be spawned on that section of the map.
Yeah, spawned on that section of the map.
I'm putting it in gamer lingo so the gamers can understand to not use their own gamer lingo.
Racism. We're going to use gaming terminology.
Yeah, this is a very weird pick. Like, why would Boston even attempt to go through this PR? Although, again, still a rumor, might not even be the actual truth.
It may not happen as well. These kind of reports. I mean, sometimes, cynically speaking, as well. Sometimes the organizations do this in traditional sports. If they're thinking of picking up a controversial player, they'll leak it to a journalist first. I'm not saying this happened in this instance, but Boston might deliberately leak something like this to somebody, get it out there into the world, see what the water's like, see if it's too hot to tread into, and then drop the guy if there's too much controversy that flares up about it. And if no one really gives a fuck, they'll be like, all right, it's safe, let's go for it. So, it does benefit the organizations to have these kind of reports and rumors circulate before they sign.
It just feels unnecessary. Like, I'm completely indifferent to Boston Uprising and their projections next year based on this signing. Like, like, does this like tickle your fancy? Like, I just don't really care.
I think it's just a straight up bad PR move, especially. I understand that people have been doing the double flex support thing recently. I just not even sure it's worth it at this point, especially as you're, like Connor said, you're insulting like a quite large majority of the market for the actual game and playing the game and watching the game and stuff. Like, why would you even think to sign a player that has said these things?
I'm surprised the league was like cool with it too.
Yeah,
because it's like
also
once
true.
Again, it's like this
well,
is I mean, if it happens,
everything is still pending league approval.
Sure.
That's the same case.
If this would happen,
Yeah.
it would be shocking to me. The league's cool with it because it's like, once again, it's very clear that China is very invested in the Overwatch League, and we don't want someone that is insulting Chinese people in the league. Like, when it's like very, like, we don't like, that's just, it's a silly economic decision too, besides that. But
to be fair,
also, I mean, people could change, right? But if they can change, do they have to immediately play in the league the next year, or even be in the league at all? Do you have being a player is a privilege? You don't have to. Not everyone is allowed. Like, when you fuck up, you don't get to keep your dream all the time. Like, that's just life. You don't get to keep living your dream when you fuck up. That's not how it works. You can still go. I still think you should go live another life outside of it. I think you should be allowed to go live your life outside and do other stuff.
Become a carpenter.
You could go all do. There's a million other jobs, but you don't have to be a player anymore. It just doesn't have to be that way. But whatever, you know.
Yeah.
I think if it did end up getting to the league and they're like, oh, wanting to sign it, we'll go through the process of signing him, whatever. I have a good feeling that pending league approval might be declined. One of the only times it has been declined because of that very reason, and because it is so recent as well. People can change, definitely. We just talked about this for a little bit now, but so recently.
Yeah,
like,
I think it's also something that the league would more likely, if they were going to do anything, impose like a multi-match ban onto him or something.
Sure.
And at that point, that has happened before in the past, where a player has been signed pending league approval, and then they go to the league and they say, okay, we want to have this guy. And they say, all right, well, you can sign him, but he'll serve a 20 match, well, maybe not 20. I don't know whether that's happened, but like, 5, 15, whatever match ban. And they're like, actually, we don't want to sign him anymore. Like, that's happened before as well, within the history of the league. So that's also
boosting rings and whatnot. That's the most recent time that's happened.
Yes, which, I mean, they well, let's not get into that as well, because that's a total different conversation. Yeah, let's move on to talking about the San Francisco Shock, because the San Francisco Shock has grabbed Sinine Muma, the 9mm Sam. 9mm Sam.
That's going to be easy to say on broadcast.
Yeah, for Overwatch League 2022, this guy's a pretty talented flex DPS player that's coming in, which really rounds out the Shock. I saw a lot of people saying, would this guy ever get playtime over Proper? But I don't think that's the right way of thinking about it. I think the way of thinking about it is that he would be played alongside Proper in metas in which that made sense. I don't think he's going to be a full-time, like, he is the starter. With the DPS core that the Shock has, I mean, Proper's just in all time, and then you work the others around him.
Yeah, makes the most sense. Seems like a very promising player. Just looking at his resume, like, first place contenders multiple times on various different teams, American Tornado, Redbird Esports, like, seems like a very good player. And hey, it's someone else that can play flex. Like, we talk about it a lot, but flex DPS players, they haven't got the highest number of players, especially that are eligible or can be considered to be picked up by Overwatch League teams. So yeah, pretty excited about that, especially going into a San Francisco Shock with the coaching structure it does have. You can imagine that this guy is going to grow an absolute ton on this team, especially surrounded by a lot of very veteran talent and the face of the league,
Well, actually, that's an important point, though, because they actually don't have that much veteran talent anymore. If you consider, I mean, Proper's been playing for a long time, but then so have Sam. So has Sam for a really reasonably decent time. But if you're talking about Overwatch League veterans, they only have Violet and Super, and,
Violet,
then they've added. Yeah. They've got Proper, Kilo, Sam, and Finn, who are all coming in as rookies this year. There isn't the system is very veteran that they would be coming into with Krusty and 9K and Violet and Super, but there's not that many players there that have got a huge amount of pedigree. or at least within Overwatch League.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to see who else they pick up on this roster. I'm expecting, a main support to be added here, maybe even another tank, but like this is a pretty hecking stacked roster, like going into next year now with tons of young, promising talent. So, I mean, we'll see if they're like amazing, like straight off the bat, promoting some of these contenders' talent to play alongside Super Violet, or if there's like a phase where, they'll have to get together, work on team chemistry, all of that stuff. Bringing in Sam from North American contenders, and then you bring in Finn and Kilo and Proper as well. Like it's going to be a bit of a clash there as well, and getting everyone up to speed. So we'll see what happens. But this roster is looking hella stacked. Looking good.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty solid.
But we'll have to see. Maybe we'll decide 2 more players.
I think Sam, which I believe is the correct way of saying it. I think Sam is to me, I was really, really impressed with some of his counterparts. In particular, I think his Echo is really good. I'm not quite sure how I feel about him on like other heroes. Like I know he has other obviously more heroes in his hero pool, and he has shown like proficiency on that in contenders, but for my own personal judgment, I like his Echo, and everything else I'm kind of like, I'm not sure how he was going to fit in just yet, but he's obviously had a lot of experience at the top of contenders. So, and I think with the system that Shock is building with Krusty and now 9K returning, it's going to be potentially a very good system for him to grow to meet his full potential. So I'm kind of actually mixed on the move just because I'm unsure about all of his other heroes, even though I know he has a relatively deeper hero pool than just Echo. I feel like his Echo is very good though.
I think from like a front office standpoint, like if you're the general manager of the San Francisco Shock, I think it's an incredible flyer just to like sign Sam onto this squad, because you got Proper and Kilo already that are going to be like great by all accounts, but they have different hero pools that'll mostly be able to play all the heroes required, very vast. So, but you can bring in Sam as well if you need like a double flex kind of meta. He's a young talent. He could become like one of the best North American players, to play the game, like be in the Overwatch League. But you're not necessarily like relying on him every single game to come in and have like superstar performances. I think it's a great signing. I think it's a great flyer from the San Francisco Shock office. Yeah, catch him. It was rumored he was going to go to Vancouver Titans instead. You pick him up. Now you can keep him on the bench, develop him, see what comes of him. I think he has tons of potential here to develop into like a great talent.
We've also got some coaching changes from the Seoul Dynasty that I wanted to talk about, because I find this to be really interesting. The Seoul coaching staff has been a topic of much discussion on this show, as their roster has been hurtling through various peaks and troughs in form and other things. They actually managed to do a pretty good job of it this season of keeping that consistency, though they weren't able to hit the same peaks. And now they've announced Tobi as head coach, which I think is really interesting to see a player that has been just a landmark of top main support play throughout the game. He's one of the oldest main supports we currently, or had, I suppose, playing. I can't think of somebody that's been around for longer than Tobi, honestly, because he's been there since the very early Apex days as a main support player.
That's currently active or like in the scene.
But
he's not really in the scene at this point now, right?
Yeah.
You have to think of people that are currently in the scene because he's not playing anymore, right? Because he's a head coach.
Sure.
So,
Avast is kind of in the scene, but he's not playing anymore.
Custer, he's in the scene. Yeah, but he is, either way, he's been around for a long time. He's seen various different metas develop, the game's evolved, and he was still playing at a pretty top level when, at this point, him making his move into coaching. So he's been joined by Wizard Hyung, and then they also have, who else?
they're all returning coaching staff, I believe.
Right.
It's like MMA, or I think it's like MMA and Bongu.
Right.
And they're all returning. So it's just like assistant coaches, analysts, and Wizard Young is now moved into a slightly different role, though, where like before he was like a assistant coach or something. Now he is the head of strategy.
Yep.
Amazing.
Head of strategy.
And Tobi's
that's a Wizard Young title, if I've ever seen
I like
it.
Tobi as head coach, but Wizard Young, head of strategy. Don't know how I feel about that.
Dude, he never finished that YouTube series. Remember that YouTube series?
Did he not finish it?
Did he only release one episode?
No. There was definitely a second episode, because one of the people that was on the show messaged me and gave me a second episode. For people who have no idea what we're talking about, Wizard Hyung was like made a YouTube series called like Wizard Hyung and the Chosen 10 or something weird like that.
Dude, the premise of that series was sick.
And it was like he was getting players from all over the world and various different SRs, and he was seeing how much he could coach them to be better at the game. And it was actually edited incredibly well and put together like a reality TV series. It was pretty cool, but I only watched the first episode and then.
The first episode was very good. The cinematography on that was just unreal, and I'm kind of disappointed. Why does this always happen to like good YouTube series where they make one sick episode and then fucking disappears?
Yeah, because they're hoping that it'll get much larger viewership, and then it doesn't, and then it can't justify the costs, and you axe the project. You know, that's the classic.
That's an esports classic.
That's the classic.
That's an esports classic, and also, or on top of that, like. The viewership is okay, but because of the overall time commitment and everything else, it's still not worth it because it just requires so much time.
To be fair, it especially the editing of this, like it probably took a long time to do. So yeah, pretty reasonable if that was the decision. It says on his Wikipedia, by the way, too, data coach as well, head of strategy and data.
Yeah, his head of strategy and data, which has always been something that Wizards done. He was actually one of the original. Data-based analyst for Overwatch in terms of like how famously he used it. And
I mean, famously as well, he had like 5 people who would collect data by watching. He didn't use like VOD scrubbers. He used humans as VOD scrubbers.
He used data serfs, and they would go in and they would all individually collect the data. Like that was before we had any tools. So he would literally have them count like this guy would shoot this many shots and then divide by the number of times they saw it hit and like determine the accuracy of someone. Like he would literally do all these calculations by hand and by eye, not him himself, but these data serfs that he had out tilling the fields of data.
I hated that story arc. Oh my god.
The story continues.
I was there in the Overwatch League as well when it happened. It was like a big thing. It was like, hey, an opportunity to like highlight a coaching member. We don't have a lot of coaches. Or like a big fuck, man. Like I can't believe it put so much emphasis on Wizard Young and his geniusness, and then Washington Justice and.
I mean, the best part about all that is that he's still, and then too, the best part about all this to me, the Wizard, we haven't even really discussed the news, but I just had to go on to this still. It's like, so the best part about the Wizard arc is like genius, justice, then goes back to a team that has been plagued with coaching issues, Seoul. And so he's still with Seoul too after all this time. And like, now granted, he's no longer like a head coach or like, he's just an analyst. So that's
he's head of data.
Well, head of strategy.
Head of strategy. That's more of his role. I'm assuming the head of strategy just informs like, I'm sure that he's going to be making suggestions and stuff on like terms of like strategic stuff, but it sounds like since they included data with that, it's just like an analyst role that has a fancier title alongside that.
Bro,
so,
if you ask for your title to be head of strategy and then the strategy of the team is dog, you can bet your ass people are blaming you. I'm gonna blame it. I mean, but
if
you have a title called head of strategy and Seoul strategy next year is bad, I'm gonna look at Wizard Young.
But he was already an assistant coach this past year too. When Seoul had some weird shit going on, he was already an assistant coach and like an analyst with them. So like he was already been directly influencing Seoul's decisions. Just they brought him back and they gave him a fancy corner office. So
what do you think about Tobi as head coach of us? You're the major Tobi simp. Are you sad he's not continuing to play?
I am sad actually. I do think he had career left, but I think if there was any time to swap out of your player career, it'd probably be now. It's when it definitely seems like it's towards the end of the life cycle. I do think he could have continued to compete. I legitimately think was pretty good still. The most balanced main support player ever, aside from like really only rivaled by Moth in terms of like how balanced the overall play was. I am mixed. So there was some controversy, right? Because Gravy got signed as a head coach for Mayhem, or not a head coach, as in a coach in general, and everyone lost their fucking minds. Head of strategy,
right? Head of strategy.
No, just an assistant coach. Just an assistant coach. Maybe head of strategy of pissing people online off. That's what his.
I thought you were going to end the sentence of
not
pissing.
Head of pissing. No, head of pissing people online off. And it caused a lot of controversy. Then the Tobi moves happened, and then I think to me, a player becoming a head coach immediately without any previous coaching experience is a dangerous move, an extremely dangerous move. Because that's the biggest thing for me. I think Tobi going to an assistant coach role would have made perfect sense for me. Head coach seems a little odd. Well, now it could be a perfect fit,
I would imagine that Tobi then is in charge of more of the holistic approach to how the team and the players move forward. Whereas, here's how I would imagine it. Basically, the people who are already running the shop continue to run the shop from the assistant coach position, and then Tobi is directing any shifts in like, how much do we practice? What amount are we doing in this? What's our general game plan for approaching 5v5 and like discussing with the team for
very
that
possible.
kind of stuff.
Very
possible. It's still bad for MMA a little bit though, no? Like Tobi just swoops in. MMA's been assistant coach for a long time now, and it's just like, well, hang on. Tobi has arrived, and it's. Just
maybe it's just the problems of like what coach of how opaque coaching is in terms of looking from the outside, because you don't really know what every coach's exact role is, other than like rumor mill and like hearing from people. Like you have no idea what
a ton of analysts too. So
like some head coaches are super involved with the strategy and the analytics and all of that stuff, but that's normally when the coaching roster is quite small. This coaching roster is pretty big, so I imagine his job's much more.
But we don't know.
Picture.
It could be. He could be very involved. Some coaches are really heavily involved with team leadership. Some aren't. Like sometimes your assistant coaches are the one-on-one player coaches. Like it's really just depending on the individual system that we're in. So as a rule of thumb, though, I don't necessarily love Tobi being a head coach with his first coaching experience. But, I mean, you're going into a new game. Tobi has a ton of experience. He's been widely regarded as a very well-respected player. So he's going to have the respect of the players on the team. He has a very cool head. Is apparently very responsible and things like that. So, like, he has the personality types to be a coach. So it's an experiment. I think it's an experiment, but I think it just goes to show you that most importantly, if you want your announcements to go well, just if you just don't piss people off, they'll like you with your new positions more. So Gravy, this one's for you, Gravy, who I'll see in the office soonish at some point. But like, yeah, people are just mad at you because you pissed them off. And so the most important thing is just make people happy and people won't fucking hate you. And that's
I'm gonna sag. I'm gonna take it one step further. I love this signing. I think it's a great signing for the Seoul Dynasty to promote Tobi to head coach. And it's not at all comparable to McGravy becoming like if he were to become like a head coach of a team, or in this case, coach for the Mayhem. Like I think Tobi, he's been around for the longest time since the start of Overwatch. He's a veteran of the sport. By all accounts, he's been by literally all accounts, he's been very successful, especially at the start of the game, won multiple Apex titles, was part of the Overwatch League, Seoul Dynasty, still to this day, really good at the game, and he proved that on the Philadelphia Fusion. Super successful, plays the main support role, leadership skills, all of that. He's been part of so many successful organizations and part of so much winning and so many different winning cultures that he's had experience in that regard. Also, he's 27. McGravy is 24. I do think age plays a part when it comes to getting respect from your players, especially in Korea, that puts large emphasis on age to this day. And example, if you talk to someone from Korea, they'll talk about how, Jaws, you actually have experience with the Korean culture and how you greet older people differently compared to younger people. There are different I'm not finding the correct word, but there are different ways to different gestures and different greetings, different ways you sit around the dinner table, all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's just still respecting your elders, basically.
Yeah, and it's still present to this day, even though some North American or European kid could be oh well, that's so ancient and so old school of you. It's still present in this day in Korean culture. So I definitely think that aids Tobi's chances of becoming a successful head coach here and winning over his players. The fact that he is a veteran, he's had massive success in the Overwatch scene, and he is an older figure now stepping in. So even though he's 27, some of these kids are 20, they're 21. They're still kids compared to Tobi in that regard. So he can garner that respect from those players, while at the same time having so much success and so many achievements on his resume that the players will buy into it as well, because they know what he's done. He was a legend in Overwatch Esports, not only in North America and Europe, but in Korean Esports. People looked up to Decay, him, Ri Jae Hong, Miro, all these fantastic players. So I think the players have massive respect for him. And I think if he has the talent to actually do his job, to be a head coach, and those kind of skills to boot, because I think this is a great opportunity for him with his resume and personality and everything got going for him. But if he also has the skills to actually be a head coach, I think he could become one of the better head coaches in the Overwatch League. So I don't think it's at all comparable to McGravy. I think McGravy, he hasn't had that same amount of success, doesn't have the same amount of respect from his peers, other players around the league. And they definitely have been around as many winning systems, many winning cultures in that regard. And I think that impacts how you view a coach, how you buy into a system, and how you buy into their ideas, which is what a coach is supposed to do. So I don't think the two cases are very comparable in that regard. And I think Tobi is a great signing for the Seoul Dynasty. I wish him the best of luck. I really hope it goes well. I'm fully supportive of it. I think it's a great pickup by Seoul.
You mentioned Miro in the middle of that. Miro's actually just changed his Twitter name to Miro_Overwatch 2. Don't know whether anyone else saw that.
That's
but,
really, I did not see that.
That would be. I assume that would be as a coach, though. I don't think he's going to come back and reprise the tank role.
No.
But
I know. I did that. Yeah, let's move on.
You also said, Connor, earlier that not pissing people off is a really important part of any announcement when you're becoming a coach. It's also pretty important for players too. The Washington Justice are thinking of shopping Decay around, according to another report by Halo here. Do we think that this is a good move or a bad move overall for Washington to potentially let go one of their star players, like one of the players that defines how their team works, and yet has so much other stuff? When you talk about Decay, you have to mention how good he is, but then also all of the nonsense that he's been involved in over the years in terms of not really getting on with certain teams or playing a very solo style that doesn't seem to mesh with other teammates. What do you think about this for the Washington Justice in the offseason?
How does this change their team? Well, because looking at their currently signed player list, they have Decay, Mag, Fury, Assassin, Happy, Krillin, and then Vigilante is signed but underage, right? Is how their current team looks. And so if you remove Decay from this squad, let's say theoretically that were to happen, does this... I mean, who do you even get to replace him? What hyperflex is available that plays Tracer and plays like hit scan? Because that's kind of the role that he plays, is that he's like kind of an Edison player that can also play projectile. Like he's sort of a hyperflex, but not really. He's just like a very flexible Tracer player that is primarily hit scan based, but can also play some projectiles. And so you look at that just on a paper. Like
I think I would define him as a hyperflex, though. I think he is a hyperflex.
Yeah, I don't think he's quite as flexible as like he play every projectile though. I think he can just play several of them.
I think we haven't seen it. I think
true. We haven't seen it.
I think the guy might be. I think his talents everywhere else would indicate that he probably would be capable of playing almost any DPS pick. The question is whether he'd play it well within a team system, because that always seems to be the case with Decay.
Yeah, I mean, also we didn't hear any complaints about Decay this year, though, right? Necessarily, there was drama around him not showing up for some of the early games, but then that was said that like he didn't feel confident and he was refining his hero pool for particular styles. So like, obviously, that we didn't hear any direct knowledge that it was Decay. Like,
well, I'm just meaning from the games that we've watched, I always felt like Decay was not. It feels like he focuses on himself rather than synergizing with the team. I feel like a lot of other people play the heroes he does in a smarter way in Overwatch. He's insanely mechanically gifted, but he gives me like I don't know, like effect vibes or something, where the guy's just trying to solo carry rather than making sure he's always coordinated.
Hey, but there's one less person to let him down in Overwatch 2.
Yeah,
you need to carry one less person. Just saying, like,
true. It's definitely going to be more carryable.
Maybe he can't drag 5 people over the finish line, but hey, can he drag 4? We'll see.
Also, his teams were shit shows, right? Like, I mean, his team this year was a shit show. It was Justice, where like it was not an issue of talent. It was an issue of that their brain stims had vanished into another dimension, and there was no fucking signals going between body to brain. Like,
yeah, but some of that responsibility is on the players as well. These are great players that should have been able to make that team work, and yet they frequently looked like one of the worst teams in North America. Not always, but they had multiple moments.
But the point being is like Decay, like, was
you're going to absolve him of all responsibility for that?
No, I'm not going to absolve him of the responsibility. I'm simply saying, is he a symptom or is he a cause? Is he somewhere in between? Like,
I think
where
probably
does Decay
somewhere
fit
in
that?
between, personally.
So like, And considering that we're moving into a more DPS centric game, I don't know. Like, you could argue about like where I would kind of state like at this point, if we're moving into a more DPS centric game, and also when I look at the Justice roster and after the performance last year, I feel like Decay is potentially necessary to keep this team having a fighting chance. Like, I'm not particularly thrilled about the signing of Krillin, though granted it's for a short term until Vigilante's of age, so like whatever. Mag and Fury were both meh last year.
I don't know about.
Yeah, they were pretty meh.
I think
Mag had like one good
Mag
moment.
had some great moments. Mag had some fantastic moments.
One good game. I think Mag had one great game versus Fearless. I think he had one great game, and it doesn't mean Mag's not good. I think Mag is still. I think his team was just dog shit, and I think like
a symptom of the team in that fact.
So I still
Mag
think,
was
but
one
I'm
of
just, just saying, like getting rid of your potential star player in a DPS centric game could backfire, specifically when there's not that many hyperflexes on the market.
Yeah.
Who's going to play Tracer for this team?
You have to build around Decay. There are only like a handful of these.
I swear they've tried that a billion times. It's not going to happen.
Well, did they though? No, did they though? Because like genuinely, like last season, as Avast said, was like a shit show. It was.
Yes,
like,
it was. There was.
I don't know what went on with like Supreme and the coaching staff and like his support players. Like they didn't have a Brig player. Holy fuck, their Brig play last year.
There were massive holes in that team. Abysmal. Do I blame Justice for shopping Decay a little bit? Maybe throwing them out there, see if they can get offers. Maybe he goes to another team. I don't blame them at all. Really,
there is no way Washington Justice as a franchise improves if they get rid of Decay.
I don't think that's true.
No way.
I think that
like Fleta. You're not gonna trade Fleta for Decay. There's no one you can like trade him on an equal level. Like you will only get worse.
There could be some cracked rookie or something that could come play. The biggest concern for me of getting rid of Decay is who plays Tracer for this team. That's the biggest thing. Who do you find to play Tracer?
Well, you expect them to someone to replace that. Or
but Happy, I don't think Happy's Tracer for what we've seen of it is that good.
Okay,
it's definitely not close to Decay.
What other team in the league do you think makes the trade for Decay? Let's play this game. Who actually says yes? Give me another Hyperflex where both teams say yes, because I can't think of one.
I'll give you a couple. The couple teams you look at, because Decay, like his magnitude, like I don't care. Well, like if Reddit jumps on us on like a narrative or whatever, like Decay, like we're overrating him. It's not that good. He hasn't that level of success. Like, sorry, I'm not gonna buy into that. I get it if you don't like Decay as a player because of his drama and because him not being able to find a team that is reliable, consistent, and he's not being able to buy into these situations. I get that if you don't like him as a player because of that. But he is extremely talented. So you're realistically looking at like Seoul Dynasty, and it's like, hey, would you want to trade Fitz for Decay, and maybe we can get like creative or something as well? But like Seoul Dynasty, they're like bought in.
Why would they trade for...
Exactly. Seoul Dynasty, like they're bought in.
Fitz also isn't a hyperflex. I mean, he's very flexible.
You don't necessarily can expect the hyperflex back, but
also he doesn't really play Tracer. It's Flutta that traditionally plays Tracer for them.
You mean Profit?
You mean Profit, but yeah.
Or Profit, I should say. Profit, yeah.
But they're not trading away Profit. And if you wanted to make like a Decay Profit, duo, like, okay, that's one of the most insane DPS duos we ever had in Overwatch. But still, I don't see Seoul making that. And then the other team is like, Shanghai Dragons is like, hey, who are you, and develop, or not even develop. It's not
but why would they want to?
Why would Justice want that?
I'm just saying, there's no team that has a trade offer.
I'm looking through some of these players. I'm going to look through some of the teams, and I'm going to ask you. We're going to play the game. Who says no? Right. So it's Washington. Decay for somebody. Which team says no? So Decay for Nero on the Atlanta Reign.
No,
because they don't want it.
Which team says no? Which team would not want that trade to happen?
Probably the Nero's team.
You think Atlanta wouldn't want Decay?
I think Justice. I mean, the thing is,
I don't think it's a good trade. Full stop. I'd say no if I was every team. I'm gonna be really honest.
It doesn't really fit either of their rosters.
It doesn't.
They're kind of clearly going like Atlanta's going full Western, and Justice are clearly trying to stay full Korean. So,
it doesn't make
What about Decay for Striker on
that
Boston?
Is the
Who says no?
That
who
is
says
the
no there?
only thing. Not sure who would say no there.
I think Decay says no because he doesn't want to go to Boston. But who knows? Maybe he wants to. I mean, maybe. I mean, honestly, who knows though? Like, I mean, that would be a really interesting. That would be the most 5D chess move ever, where Huck's like, "Striker, come back," and then he just trades him for Decay. Like, that would be
I'd
really
love that though.
funny.
I actually think that move makes some level of sense.
That move actually would make sense.
Striker and MCD.
I don't think you need like a straight hyperflex. You're talking about trading. It's like, how many hyperflexes do we even fucking have in the league? We don't have that many at all.
It's
like,
mostly
you just get a tracer one trick
tracer
at that point.
They just
yes, you just get a tracer one trick.
But ideally, your tracer player moving to Overwatch 2, you don't want to have a tracer one trick for Overwatch 2 simply because there's a possibility where, depending on the map design or hero design as we move into it, like you want someone to be, you don't want to have a one trick player because that's going to really hurt you in a new game potentially.
Yeah. Okay, definitely. But you'd get someone that's like specialized in tracer who can play a few other things. You don't necessarily need a hyperflex. Assassin could still play these flex.
I think Striker.
Play, Striker to me is like the most obvious one.
Decay for Edison from the Dallas Fuel. Who says no?
No, I mean, who says no?
No, Dallas doesn't. What are you?
Come on.
What are you talking about?
I think I know who says no.
No way.
I think I know who says no.
The fans say no.
The fans say no.
I think the Fuel front office say no. Potentially to that.
Let me think if there's any others. I'm just scrolling through the other teams at the moment.
Decay for Hisu.
Decay for Hisu. I mean, I don't think that really fills the tracer role, though.
I mean, does Hisu play tracer that much? Yeah.
You gotta stop thinking with the one-to-one comparisons. Like sometimes you can get value.
It's not about the one-to-one.
Do
they need a tracer player? You need to have a
one-to-one comparison would be a hyperflex.
Put a bandage on. It's fine.
They don't even need a one-to-one.
Dallas didn't need a tracer player.
They just need a tracer that can also flex.
Okay,
what tracer that can also flex.
What about? I'm loving this game actually. What about for Dante on the Houston Outlaws?
See, okay, I was gonna propose that simply because think about this.
What?
Think about this. Houston needs a hit scan player. Decay can play hit scan. In fact, he prioritized hit scan last year.
Decay Pelican is a DPS line.
But the biggest problem with that is that Dante would have to go to a full Korean roster, so I don't think it would happen.
What the fuck are Justice gonna do with Dante? Assassin Dante DPS line with
I mean that
would be all right.
Krillin and Dante on the same team.
Dante plays tracer, he plays flex heroes like that. That's totally fine.
Also, Washington are the fucking US brand. They get a US player, you know, like.
I think they've abandoned Happy before as well. So there's some sort of synergy there too.
Yeah, I think there's a legitimately decent argument to be made for that trade. It's just not going to happen.
It's just
what about if Washington really don't want Decay? Decay for Sparker. Does London accept?
Decay for Sparker.
I mean, I feel like London would. I mean, honestly, if I'm London, I'd feel like if I can take
fuck it, YOLO, right?
I accept.
Fuck it, YOLO.
If they just do a one-to-one trade, if they're saying like, yeah, we'll take Sparker's most likely minimum contract and trade it for Decay's probably hyperback, but we don't have to pay any extra. Just like you pay the difference, then we just to take them. Like then London takes it. Sure.
So Washington is still paying Decay's salary, but they get Sparker.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
God,
okay. What about, I think we could also look at it like, what if Washington Justice, like they dealt Decay to someone like New York or someone trying to build a team, and they signed Yaki. Like, I don't know what the status
swap
is
for
of
Yaki
right
New
now.
York.
That would be sick. Yeah. I mean, getting Yaki would be insane.
That would be
insane.
That would be a huge get. I would have so much more faith in the Justice, but I think I'm not sure how much it would change my faith in New York, actually. I think New York look like they've got a pretty talented roster, but they've already got like a collection of I don't really know how it's going to work players. And so adding Decay in there, Decay's a great player, but he's also I don't know how it's going to work with your team.
It is a fun question, actually. I'll ask you this, Sideshow, then. If you only got to pick one as a GM or a coach, whatever, if you only got to pick one, would you rather have Decay or Yaki?
Yaki, definitely.
Because definitely over Decay.
Yeah, Yaki definitely.
Yes,
because
100%.
Here's the thing: at some point, I really have to start asking the question: why hasn't Decay had the success that he mechanically should be able to have? And I was thinking about that all year this year while I was watching him play, and I do really believe part of it is because he doesn't seem to. I don't know whether I'm gonna imagine that it does primarily come from him, and it's not just his teammates are completely silent around him. But he doesn't try to make the same synced up plays as the other top teams do a lot of the time. Like a lot of the other DPS players are specifically fighting over certain areas of the map to get in position for someone else to like set up a dive with them or something like that, right? There's like some skirmish that goes on, and then you go in at the same time as the rest of your team. Decay fights constantly. He's just in there fighting. It doesn't matter what the hell is going on with the rest of his team. He's just trying to like hard carry, get picks wherever he can. It doesn't matter whether the rest of his team are retreating or they're pushing. He's just always active, always doing something, always trying to get an advantage for his team, which it looks cool, and he often does manage to get huge advantages. But I feel like the method in which he plays is to some extent part of the ceiling for him as well.
It's almost archaic as well, because as the game evolves, and this goes for other esports too, people just get smarter. Team play becomes just way fucking better. I think a good example of this is looking.
I agree this year. I don't think that's necessarily the case next year. I think next year could be a spaghetti fest where someone like Decay could actually hard carry. I think Decay actually could hard carry next year. In a game where no one knows what's going on and it's 5v5, he could just run around killing one player at a time and win.
Yeah. True. I think it's yeah, sure. I mean, my point's kind of null and valid then. Null and void, sorry. In that regard. Yeah. Forgot we were moving to a different game. Maybe we aren't.
We are in fact playing a different game. Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's move on to talking about the Dallas Fuel. They signed Rascal as assistant coach, so going for a similar move actually to the Seoul Dynasty, except not the head coach position. Rush is not getting ousted for Rascal, but this is another player with a huge amount of experience who's been everywhere, done everything, and is now going to coaching as we move into Overwatch 2. What do you think about this move? Seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, it seems extremely reasonable, and it's almost like it was almost time for it to happen. I think Rascal was a bit of an oddity to me, because there was some points where like he was just absolutely clapping cheeks. And then there were other points where like he was just never played. We'd hardly ever see him. But I think that was more to do with the meta and the teams that he's been on. Because what a shock, Philadelphia Fusion. I think him moving to a role as a coaching role, because he can play so much stuff too, or like an assistant coaching role, and he has so much experience looking all the way back into like Apex and stuff. It's like a Tobi kind of move too. I really enjoy the fact that he's going as an assistant coach under Rush as well, another extremely accomplished coach with continuing to coach players that he's coached basically his whole career at this point as well. I think it's a fantastic.
Did he ever coach Rascal? I don't think he ever coached Rascal, right?
No, I don't think so. Which
would
have been a very cool storyline.
I'd have to check, but I don't believe so. I think it's an interesting move. I mean, once again, like when you take accomplished players and put them in coaching positions, you're taking a gamble. It's why I didn't necessarily agree with Jonathan's point with Tobi, is because like there are plenty of great players in the past that become coaches and immediately fizzled out and burned. Coco. Remember Coco? Coach?
Okay,
Anyone remember Coco, coach? Remember Coco? And remember Grim Reality? And you remember Grim Reality?
Right now?
But at the time, the point being, Coco, let's say Coco won Apex. Coco won Apex. He won Apex and was still at the top of North America playing Overwatch. And then he went and played Overwatch League and became a coach. And so if we took those and their points of time, but that's not the point. If at that time, if both Tobi and Coco became coaches, would you not have agreed that their pedigree was essentially the same at that exact same moment in time? Around there. Both had won Apex.
Dude.
Not quite, but I understand your point.
But you understand what I'm saying. They're still in the same realm. Those are both major tournament winners.
Another example is
let's take Grim Reality, who obviously is like was Kai. Like there's plenty of players that have turned coaches that have not always had great results. Okay, there are players that have very minimal success that I think have had very good coaching careers. Aid, for example. Aid, who became an assistant coach. I think Aid, everything I've heard about Aid has seemed that he's been a great player coach and a great assistant coach. He's gone in that position. So
I mean, actually, Kuki as well didn't really achieve much as a player, but has achieved that much and is reasonably well as a coach. Now, last year was not good, but over his
but we'll see as we move forward, right? I don't think previous player success has nothing to do with their coaching ability, in my opinion. It's not a harmful benefactor, right? Like if you're a very successful player and you have a lot of wealth of knowledge, then I think, and also the type of player and their success matters greatly, right? Because like if Decay, who everyone is like a great player, amazing player, if you became a coach right now, would you be like, I can't wait to see Decay as coach? I can't wait to see Decay as coach, right? Like, I don't think so. But when you take a much more, I think specifically Tobi makes a lot of sense because not only is he experienced, but also he's been known to be a very smart player, right? So I still think that the difference is there between the two, obviously because his success and his actual temperament and what people describe his play as and what you see and his influence on the game. But at the end of the day, it's still an unproven coach, and experience and awards don't necessarily translate into coaching ability at all.
I think Tobi is a unicorn. I think he's, for me anyway, and I understand if you don't agree with me here, I think he is the exception in that regard to someone I would be comfortable handing the head coach reins for. But when it comes to these other players, when it comes to all these other players, like you mentioned, I think an assistant coach role to get your beginning started, especially if you had previous experience with the head coach or someone on that team to step in as an assistant coach, because then they know already if you're capable to be an assistant coach and if that is something you got potential to work as and contribute to. So I think Rascal is an assistant coach. I think that's reasonable. It's like, hey, like maybe you can bring in, you can help us out, help us out with this. I think Tobi is the exception in that way, and that's why I'm vouching so much for him. I don't think in any way Tobi can be compared to Coco, or rather the other way around. I don't think you can compare Coco.
But I mean, obviously,
Coco can step in and be a head coach right there. No, their
accolades are different. But I mean,
it's a straw man, dude.
Just it's not a straw man. That's not a straw man.
You can't just say like, oh, what if Snillo was a tracer coach for an Overwatch League team?
What if he was? What if he was?
No, because it's so different. But yes, they both been Overwatch League players. Like, yes, they have something in common, but that doesn't mean that.
But the point being, I mean, I still think there's a difference between Tobi. Obviously, I think Tobi is a different caliber, which is why he is different. But the point being is that you can't put a blanket statement on it.
One of the interesting things for Rascal's storylines, ever since he was playing in Apex, though, is that every time a new hero hit the game, he was immediately one of the best at it. That's been the case for almost all of the new heroes I can think of. I specifically remember it for Sombra. Then I remember it extraordinarily for Batiste when he was playing that with the Shock. And then when Echo came out, he was immediately one of the best Echo players. I mean, other people overtook him, but that's part of it, that he is really good at the beginning of it. I think that's a really interesting narrative to follow for the Dallas Fuel if he's doing positional coaching for these players. And if, as we talked about earlier, if they trickle release heroes into next year, that could be really cool to see Rascal's coaching of somebody on Sojourn or somebody on some new character that gets released, and see if we can see that impact in what the Dallas Fuel are doing. That's a storyline I'm really interested to follow.
Yeah.
On the other side of things, LiNkzr retires from competitive Overwatch. Longtime player, played for a huge amount of time ever since the very, very beginnings of European Overwatch. And I believe he's going over to Valorant, right? To try and...
He says he's going to try it out, but he hasn't really made like any firm decisions, but he wants to try doing Valorant.
He's going the MBK move, where you say you're going to move and then you just stream for a while and hope somebody picks you up. So LiNkzr's been... It felt like LiNkzr's been on the way out for a while now, but he was definitely a great player at the early beginning of 2018, and a player that a lot of people enjoyed watching, especially like before the league even began, actually, in like 2016, 2017 as well. Definitely a fan favorite with Houston Outlaws. And then most recently, playing for the Breadsticks.
Arguably one of the greatest things.
It's always been a good aimer. I wouldn't be surprised to see him do fairly well in Valorant. I don't know if he got picked up by a tier 1 team at this point, but maybe he grinds that, does something well. I mean, he's got the work ethic there, or at least it seems so. I know in the Twitlonger he said something about, so Valorant, Apex, OW League, and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll see where he can go from there. What is the success rate of players transferring to Valorant successfully after being in the Overwatch League? Because you have Baby Bay, of course.
Yeah,
I mean, you have Baby Bay, Corey, Zach.
Yeah,
how many players? Because Corey, Zach actually just joined a team together, and so their success is tied together, right? So you can't really.
But they had reasonable success. I mean, also we had.
Well, they all just got cut from FaZe, actually, apart from Baby Bay. So
did they get cut? I thought they were looking for other options.
They are looking for other options.
They said they're exploring opportunities.
Exploring outside opportunities. Yeah. Cut was perhaps too strong of a word, but it seems like the team is going.
I mean, you have like Zumba.
Zumba's still doing pretty well. Bunny, who plays Bunny, is doing relatively well as well. You got
know
Sire
we're
player
missing
who
someone
changed his name
else.
to Spider. He did all right, but has kind of been in and out of a decent like top 10 team within North America, I guess.
If we include non-Overwatch League players, Derek from Rise.
Sure, Derek's
That was
done
an
incredibly
Overwatch.
well.
That was a
but
Contenders player.
yeah, that was a Contenders player.
There was
also,
whatever
like-
the fuck is going on with OG. Whatever the fuck's going on with him. I don't know.
Trill was actually playing for a while on like an
was.
up and coming team and was doing okay. The team was doing all right. Not that I watched too many of their games because they were a real like tier 3 team that was on the come up. But who else? Ants tried to make the move but didn't really do anything. Like he didn't even join the team as far as I can recall. So I have no idea how good Ants would have been if he'd stuck with it. There isn't really a correlation of success, but I think most people who were top tier in the Overwatch League would find it simple to be able to find at least some level of career in Valorant. But LiNkzr, though, he wasn't at his prime in the recent seasons, so I don't know what his actual form looks like, and I don't know how long he spent playing games like CS before, so I've no idea. I don't know. I just wish him the best, but I don't know how successful he'll be. Hard to say.
Do pretty well.
Hard to
Nice
say.
guy. Like him a lot. I
Yes,
think
very,
he's
very
a
nice guy.
super cool guy. So I hope
Lovely
he has
dude.
success in whatever he does. What if
Made
he
good
becomes a
memes.
coach? What if LiNkzr becomes an assistant coach?
He said he was open to opportunities, but yeah, that's that would be bizarre, I think. But there you go. We've got another report from Halo as well, and this one I think is the most interesting thing I've ever seen Halo report, actually, which is that Patiphan is reportedly coming back to Overwatch 2, in fact, to play for the LA Gladiators. This is the kind of one that I really, really, really hope that Halo has done his due diligence on, because reporting something like this can massively affect like Patiphan's career choices as he tries to decide between Valorant and Overwatch, because he might not have told everybody involved at all times what his competing offers were for 2022. But Patiphan, for anyone who's unaware, is a player from Thailand who was underage. That's why he hasn't been involved in the Overwatch League up until now. He was like 14 when he first played in the Overwatch World Cup. He popped off. He's a great fucking player. He's flex DPS, but probably more of like towards the hyperflex kind of thing. But maybe not a true hyperflex. I think it remains to be seen how much he could really play hitscan stuff as he came back to Overwatch. But I mean, he's been playing hitscan the whole time in Valorant. He's playing in Champions in a month. He's playing in the top tournament at the end of the year for Valorant. And he's coming back to LA Gladiators, apparently, because they pay more than the Southeast Asian Valorant scene. I think it's so cool that the guy can play at the top level in both esports. I think that's nuts.
It's sick. It was a real tragedy, honestly. Just getting owned because you were too young. Because he was just a god. Like best Thai. Is he the best Thai player of all time? Probably at this point.
I mean, it's him or Mickey, maybe, isn't it?
Mickey, right? Yeah. So and like this was the same era. I'm glad you're showing this clip because this was the same time where Element Mystic had Sparkle and the Doomfist 1v1s. I was casting at this point as well. And like, oh my God, that was the whole series was just about Patiphan playing Doom and Sparkle playing Doom. It was just two humongous highlight players. And it was such a shame that he was so young at the time. It's like, oh man, it was like almost a joke, a cruel joke. It really was. He's one of the most, I would say if he could have gotten picked up at that point, he would have been up there with Sparkle, rank 1 and rank 2 of like the most hype players coming out of contenders that year. He is just so good at the video game. And like you said, Josh, going to another fucking game and then also competing at a high level. Like the guy's a beast.
Not just a high level, but he's arguably the best player
At the
in
top
Thailand
level.
at Valorant as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could say that for sure, because the Thailand actually does have a bunch of pretty decent players, but he's up there. Like he's top 3 in Thailand or something.
Actual
at Valorant.
like prodigy level player at this point. And if he comes to Overwatch League and just pounds, dude, I'm pumped. And I could see that happening too. An absolute prodigy that unfortunately was too young to join the league. I see Johnny has turned into a plant. Not sure what happened there.
What happened to him?
He's finally gone back to his roots, I guess. Well, there we go.
know.
But yeah,
He looked like he was having issues of some point. I could see him moving, fidgeting around his room.
He started to photosynthesize. That has caused him issues.
What do you think this does for the Gladiators? If this turns out to be correct and Patiphan moves to the Gladiators and plays with them next season, this team is already looking stacked. We talked about that last week, how good the roster looks on paper. Does the addition of Patiphan move them into like another tier for you guys?
What
I think Patiphan is like. I think it's kind of remains to be seen how he's going to perform at the Overwatch League level, right? To me, he sort of signed. He's signed as like one of those developmental prospects, kind of like he's kind of like a tuba sorts, but different.
Bro, he's so much better than tuba.
No. Listen.
Okay.
No one the point is no one knew who the fuck Tuba was, and when Tuba came out and played some of his projectile heroes, he was fucking cracked, right? Now, obviously, people know who Patiphan is, but he has been out of the scene for a bit. He's been playing a whole different game, and his expectations are kind of wild because he hasn't been playing the game, and also he's never been in Overwatch League before. He's only been like playing in contenders. Yeah. So I view him as just someone that it's a developmental prospect in that he could be very, very good. But in return, you still have like LiNkzr and Ons, both proven talents now, to shore up your DPS line and to see. But like he's probably going to be there if he does return to be more of a flex player to play alongside LiNkzr and like double flex type of metas, double flex DPS metas, that is. So I think to me, if he plays at his peak performance and they can also refine his skill, because that was one thing as well. He was a very wild player at times. Like he was a very DM heavy player when he was playing Overwatch.
Yeah.
I think if they can refine him and make him a little bit more
you want to unleash
polished.
Him. It's 5v5, Connor. Unleash the DPS.
That's true. I mean, it's 5v5 as well. So, but the point is, you would still want to see some polish out of him. I think get some polish out of him. So, I think his ceiling is very, very high, but we just don't know what it's going to be like if it actually comes to pass.
I mean, I think it's good that he signs to the Gladiators in the sense that you already touched on LiNkzr, but you also have Ons too. You can 100% rely on Ons and LiNkzr to be the carries if you really need them to, and then they can mold Patiphan into something that they want and just grow him as a player as well. Yeah, he's been out the game for a little while, but to be honest with you, considering how quickly he's been able to prove himself in Valorant, I have no problem in saying that he is going to be able to jump back in rather quickly and pick up the game as well.
Yeah, I think he's just that talented.
Overwatch 2 is a brand new game too. Yeah, I genuinely do. Yeah, he is that talented just to jump in, probably be at a high level, and then Gladiators can kind of roll from there.
Yeah. Okay, our final topic of the day then is about the Vancouver Titans, because they are apparently no longer going to be breadstick central. They're actually making some moves, some reported, some announced, but this team has now got themselves a tidy little roster apparently starting to develop. And Connor, you were talking last week and a couple of weeks ago as well about the Titans being willing to splash some cash. That certainly seems to be the case, right?
Yeah, it does. I think that they are changing their paradigm here because they haven't actually officially signed anyone, right? No. Just rumors, but the rumors are all pretty cool, because the rumors are like there's like Masa, Aspire, and I can't remember what the other rumors might be. Oh, yeah, false. Yeah,
Shockwave?
Shockwave. So
yes.
yeah, that's right, Shockwave. So just when you look at those names, those are all false contenders talent, but still was at the top of contenders. So I do think when you start seeing the pieces of that roster, if that does come to pass, it's going to be it's no longer going to be breadstick team. We're no longer looking at a pizza franchise in the Overwatch League. We're looking at a potential actual team. So I do think that there is something to be said about if this were to happen, that they could be a real contender.
Well, I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, they could pick up some of these players, but just end up being like a Toronto Defiant, and at that point, I still think they're worthy of the breadsticks clan.
Well,
breadsticks clan.
That's my question, actually, though, because if you consider where the other teams are at, where the other rosters seem to be trying to go, a lot of other people are spending money, and sure, the Vancouver Titans themselves might be, but people don't seem to want to join. Or at least I could imagine people might not want to join the franchise as much. Masa is a big pickup, I think. Clearly their best player from what he's been able to showcase in the past. But what do you think this roster is actually going to be able to be, mid-table to the point where you recover the franchise's reputation? Because I think that's what it is, right? People look at the Vancouver Titans and they think at the moment, bad team. Whereas in the past, they looked at Vancouver when they had the runaway squad and they were like, holy shit, God team. I love them. They are my favorite team ever. So the recovery of the reputation here, I think, is what you're going for in this offseason. Are these players good enough to do that?
No, I think you need a lot of work. I don't think it even has anything to do with the players. I don't mean it to sound like it's the players need to be better, but I think that was such a massive fuck up in terms of like how bad the training facility and the housing was for those Vancouver Titans players, and getting rid of the runaway who were like loved, like that was a loved team by the community because of their history within the scene. I think that was a major fuck up, and I don't think even becoming like a mid-table team is going to have fans forgetting about that and how they disrespected and mistreated some of those former players of theirs. So I think you need like major shakeups or some pretty big achievements to be able to have fans forget about that. Or as time goes on, maybe people will forget. But I think as it stands, like no matter how you sign, I think that specific cause, I think it's a bit. I don't think you can get rid of that stamp necessarily straight away.
Yeah, I think if you can, winning fixes everything. So if they were to do really well, I think it would solve most of their issues.
Not quite, not everything, but some.
It really does. Like, you can have completely dysfunctional rosters that only exist because at the time they're really good and their synergy at that point works. And then as soon as something goes wrong and they stop winning, then it falls apart, right? It's like winning kind of in competitive sports does fix everything because it hides all the fucking broken shit underneath the winning. And I do think that.
Do you think it's likely?
No, I don't. I think, and also there's no guarantee they get these players either. But like when you look at their roster so far, the supposed roster of leaked players, Masa, Aspire, Shockwave, False is like probably looking at like a mid-table to maybe upper mid-table roster at best. But like at best. But like there's no way that they're looking to be like a top 3-4 team from that, right? Like, and the level of winning you have to get to pretty much erase or patch over all the past problems with this team and their previous season performance is like top. You need like a top 4 or 5 level performance to
you
be
need
like
a Shanghai Dragons-esque performance.
You need to have like a ridiculous turnaround, and there's probably no way that happens. And even though but it's definitely going to be a good rebuild if these players are picked up, and it's potentially gives you hope that the team's not going to be a meme. It just won't fix any of the other issues in like their previous image.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that, and hopefully they have another breadstick. Well, actually, I don't think the breadsticks game would be fun if they actually won the breadsticks early in the season. The point was the starvation. That was, in fact,
you want starvation.
Involved.
Yeah, I mean, there's unlikely there's a breadstick bowl that occurs this next year if that roster does come to pass, I think. So.
Yeah, I think you can continue with it. I think you can move on. You can start integrating community into it. Have like breadstick night.
You can also just pass it to a new team. I think you could have a baguette bowl. I think Paris and London potentially.
Yeah,
potentially that could be the fight for next year.
Yeah.
We don't know though. Not certain.
Let's move on to our final segment, the most important segment of the week, which is Bren's Player of the Week. And Bren's Player of the Week this week takes us back to our first topic because there's only one person that would qualify this week, and it's, of course, Alarm in remembrance. Player of the Week, Player of the Year, hopefully commemorated in the future in some method within Overwatch or Overwatch League, be that through the Rookie of the Year thing or through various other ways in which he could be commemorated and remembered. So yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about it because we already talked about it and discussed that whole topic. But it's Alarm, and we would encourage you to go and just take a look at his highlights, remember him, say a couple of kind words on the Fusion Twitter, because I'm sure some of his family will be taking a look at that and see kind of how the community was remembering it over these next couple of days. So Bren's Player of the Week this week, Alarm. And we'll see you next week for another episode as well, as we head into 113. All right. That was a pretty long episode, but we chunked through quite a lot. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.